Jason.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, what's up, guys?
What's up?
Like, I haven't done one of these, so this is the only thing that I've got. You know, I know it's beers and DJs, so
it's not quite that.
Classes.
We don't want Chris Liebig suing us from Germany. So.
Nice. Oh yeah. Well, we've all got beers. I mean, I probably could have got a better
wine.
Beer, but Fat Tire will do it.
I kind of feel like I should have had like a big, tall German frosted glass with beer.
Yeah.
Totally. You know, I'll stop recording. You go to the store and get it, and come back.
Yeah, there you go.
And we'll start over. I mean, we could probably talk for 4 hours, so you have time.
Yeah.
So, me being the new guy, I'm curious about you guys. I mainly know about Eric over there. If it's the same view, where is it? Oh, is he down for you?
He's over for me.
You're down at the bottom right corner.
Yeah, you're over there, Chris. You're bottom right corner as well.
Yeah, you're bottom. Yeah, it's super weird. But I'm really curious.
DJ Brady.
With Alice in the middle. Who's our
Eric's
Alice?
Background here. That's where Eric is for me.
He's here for me. Yeah, he's here for me too.
Okay, cool. So I was kind of curious. You know, Eric and I have talked a lot. You know, and usually when I run into DJs, the first thing I don't want to talk about is DJing. The thing that I do want to talk about is what led people to move in that direction. Like, where is your foundation? Where are you coming from? Like, when I started, you know, the rave scene kind of had happened in the 90s, but I wasn't feeling it in the early days because it was the days of real high energy and a lot of diva vocals and stuff like this. So for me, it sounded like it was an advancement or a de-advancement, depending on your opinion, of like top 40 and pop music in a way. That's kind of what it felt like. Even though it felt like something new, the newness of it was just the crowd and the sound system for me, right? So I didn't really get into club music like that until it started sounding darker and a bit more progressive. And all of a sudden it sounded like there were post-punk influences for me. And I know a lot of people come from like a metal background into this, and people come from like all different sorts of things. So I'm kind of curious, like for me, I was like an 80s goth kid, you know? So I was into the darker music, and what I got into was kind of the crossover bands that were like kind of industrial and kind of rave.
You should have been born in Frankfurt.
That's where
all that was going on when they called all that techno, even though it wasn't what we were thinking of techno nowadays.
I'll drop some names, and a lot of people probably will not have heard of the artist, but you can like.
I know a bunch of industrial, buddy.
You know some shit, yeah. There was a group called Eon that had a club hit called "The Spice Must Flow." R.I.P. to him. There was 808 State.
Oh, 808 State, yeah.
You know, obviously was doing great stuff. You know, then you had like the James Brown is Dead sort of thing, which was very ravey, but kind of pulled a little bit from industrial. You know, but then it wasn't for me until like Orbital and Underworld, Prodigy, and Left Field, and Future Sounds of London. I think those were kind of the five that really was like, oh shit, something's happening. And then Chemical Brothers and The Orb kind of came into it. And for me, it felt like they were coming from my background, you know? They weren't coming from, I'm into pop music and I'm gonna just, you know, add diva vocals or something to this new style of music and try to make something new. I was intrigued by it just because it sounded so different, but I didn't want to make it until I started hearing some of those darker and post-punk and punk influences in the music.
Basically until you heard the soundtrack to the movie Tomb Raider. And once that everything, I think every group you just listed was on that soundtrack.
Yeah.
Were they really?
Yeah.
Probably.
If you ever take Go back and take a look at that soundtrack from the original Tomb Raider movie. And that whole soundtrack was everybody that you just listed off right there.
Fuck, I gotta listen to Tomb Raider.
Yeah,
awesome.
it's a fantastic soundtrack.
What about Wipeout XL? Do you guys remember Wipeout? Wipeout XL on PlayStation?
Yes.
I do vaguely. I was really young. I'm younger than you guys. I'm 31, so you know.
Yeah.
I did have PlayStation. I think I played that, but like my memory from
it was like it was like kind of a future racing game, and it had I think it had Orbital for sure, Future Sounds of London, Chemical Brothers were in there somewhere. I mean, it was just like an introduction in the same way that like Grand Theft Auto Vice City was an introduction for a lot of kids who hadn't heard 80s music. And all of a sudden there's this game that has radio stations with all these different, hundreds of 80s tunes. And all of a sudden there was like a resurgence, which I will bet can be credited for the resurgence of like synthwave and that sort of music coming back. You know what I mean? So
just so you know, I just pulled this up because I was trying to remember myself. I just pulled up the track list from the Tomb Raider soundtrack. And so get this track list from this time period. It had U2, Nine Inch Nails, Chemical Brothers, Missy Elliott, Outkast, Moby, BT, Basement Jaxx, Fatboy Slim, Fluke, Groove Armada, Bosco, and Oxide and Neutrino.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's a crazy good soundtrack.
Yeah, that music was not popular.
Another good one. Do you remember Cool World had a really cool soundtrack? And that's actually where the
isn't that the adult version
of Papua New Guinea by Future Sounds of London was on that soundtrack as well, which I think was pretty influential.
What were you saying, Chris?
Oh, I was just saying, isn't that movie like the adult version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
That sounds hot.
I don't know which one's the adult version and which one isn't, It depends on where you're pausing the DVD.
Oh, that's true.
All the bunny sex, obviously. That's
all the
good stuff.
All the little Easter eggs in those movies, right?
Yeah.
God, I miss Easter eggs.
Yeah, what's crazy about this Tomb Raider soundtrack, looking at it, is so obviously it's a Hollywood movie, which is American, and if this came out in, I don't know, when did Tomb Raider come out? 97, 98, movie-wise?
Yeah.
Right around 2000.
Right around 2000? Yeah, this music, we were like alt-rock by this point. This was era of Limp Bizkit, and they went straight, London 1996. On this soundtrack.
Well, it's funny, Alex, when we were talking last week, that it's kind of was in that weird period where, techno and a lot of kind of even the industrial new wave and stuff like that, a lot of that stuff was very American at, kind of the early mid 90s. And then it got squeezed out, it got squeezed out by grunge music. It got squeezed out by alt rock. It got squeezed out by hip hop, and it left and went to Europe, and it was huge over there while it was just totally forgotten here.
Yeah, well, the same thing happened with techno as well.
Kind of came back,
Yeah, all these people on the soundtrack, they were like straight English, though. It's not like they're American artists who were represented well in England, like all the original house music guys, like
well, and that's the thing is a lot of that.
These are all English
it was
people.
kind of the taste of the time. It was kind of the taste of the time was people were into it when it was, into it here, no matter where the artists were from. And then that stopped. And then people were into it over there. And, if you watch old documentaries about, American techno DJs, for example, you see that during those days, all of the American techno guys couldn't get gigs here. They were all playing over there, because that's where the music was big. And then it kind of came full circle and came back to here again. But, people like Richie Houghton and Future and stuff like that, they couldn't get gigs in the States at that time.
Yeah.
So they were all playing over there.
It's funny. It's been that way for a long time. There's a couple examples of American bands that no one would sign and I think you'd be surprised. For example, one band that had to go to England to get signed and came back and became freaking superstars, like Blondie. No one would sign Blondie.
Yeah.
Think about that, right? An American band that had to go to England. Another band was the Stray Cats.
Really?
Yeah, they had to exit Planet USA, you know, to
And even more recently, I think we talked about this before, Jason, but my cousin was in a band called The Bravery, and they
I remember the Bravery.
They couldn't get gigs here in the States, and they got this manager who basically said, hey, I've got this idea. I'm going to bring you guys over to England for a year, and you're going to play every city in England, and you're going to blow up there because it's easier geographically because it's a lot smaller. And then you're going to get a lot of radio play, and then people over here are going to notice because you're going to be chart topping in England, and then you'll come back and we'll be able to book you. And then this really smart manager that they had as well had this whole idea that really ended up blowing them up, which was they would do one national US tour or even a world tour where they would open and play huge venues, but they would open for bigger artists. And then they would follow that up with a tour of their own, playing smaller venues, headlining. And then they would kind of move up in scale with the bigger artists again, opening. And there's a lot of artists out there that once they get to a certain level, they kind of refuse to take the step back and open up for somebody, and it squishes their career. And what these guys ended up doing was, you know, they did a tour, for example, where they toured all over North America, opening up for Green Day. And then they did their own tour where they headlined, but they were headlining places, you know, like the Bluebird in Denver, like small venues, but they were headlining.
Yeah.
And then the next tour they did, they toured all over Europe, opening up for U2. And then they came back to the States and played the next size bigger venues, playing their own headline.
It seems like that's the way it works, right?
It worked so well for them.
Speaking of people going to, go ahead.
Wasn't She Wants Revenge as well like that? Like what you just said, Eric?
That wasn't who?
She Wants Revenge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that like pop punk? Is that like
there's a story behind them? I'll talk about it in a sec, but we are on. Remind me if She Wants Revenge.
One thing I wanted to bring up was about the whole people coming from over the United States to England is so I asked this question to you guys all know Tony Humphries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know the I don't know, Kiss FM Zanzibar club resident back in the 80s. He was a resident over at Ministry of Sound for the longest time. And how he got that gig is because someone heard him while in New York City, and they were like, this is amazing. You know what? No one's giving you credit over here in the United States. We'll bring you over to England. We'll make you huge. And that's exactly what happened, according to him.
Yeah.
They just kind of, you know, cherry picked him out, and they were like, okay, you're coming to London. You're going to be, you know, hot fire at our new high-end Ministry of Sound club, and you're just going to blow up.
And the thing is that a lot of that came from what we were talking about, that people weren't really appreciating that music at that time here, but they were over there. And for as much as Americans forget that techno is an American genre of music and house is an American genre of music, they think it's European. Europeans never forgot that it was American. And so in those days, if you were an American DJ playing over there, they were like, oh my God, this guy's from where house is from. So he's a big deal, or he's from Detroit. So he's a real techno guy. But over here, nobody cared at that time.
Yeah, right. I mean,
still kind of don't.
Yeah, you know, it's we have a history of the innovators in a lot of things, but you know, if we just stick with artistry, American innovators that get ignored here, and their idea is exported and then re-imported with 100x value. You know, once it comes back after being bounced through, you know, usually Europe, it comes back stronger. I mean, here we tried to make a big electronic movement, I think in like 97, right? They tried to push it.
In the States or in Denver?
In the States, in the States. And they didn't think that it went big enough. I mean, they didn't try to, they didn't let it grow at all. They're just like, let's throw all this stuff out. It better sell millions, and it didn't. So they just gave up on it and went for something completely different. And then it just grew and grew and grew in Europe. You know,
I think
It
a
just
big
kept
part of
going
that.
there.
I think a big part of that was. So I just watched this documentary. Have you ever seen the Sound City documentary about
I don't think
the?
so.
It was on HBO forever ago. Now it's on YouTube for free, and by HBO. And basically, it told the story of Sound City, which was like this dingy, smelly recording studio that opened in the late '60s that had a string of really famous artists coming through it. Like they had their first big album that they recorded was Fleetwood Mac.
Oh,
They
wow. Okay.
And that was one of the first ones they recorded, period, because they got lucky enough to get Buckingham Nicks to record their first album there. And so Fleetwood Mac was something before Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks was
right.
in it. There was something before that, but they had, a falling out, or like, go figure, Fleetwood Mac, but members left the band, or the guitar player left the band, and they were shopping around for venues, and they found this one, and they were in there, and they heard, they listened to Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham's album over the speakers. They're like, whoa, who are these people? We need this guitar player. And, they came together. So, but fast forwarding in the story is, but they were famous for is they didn't use any effects or anything like that in their recordings. They had a really nice analog board that was, it's like a Neves mixer or something like that.
Neve.
Neve mixer. Yeah.
Yep.
Neve. Yeah. And it was made in 1971. It was worth $75,000. So, what is that, like close to 180,000 or something like that today. So they recorded like Tom Petty and all this stuff on it. And then they had a real big problem.
I was just going to mention Tom
80s.
Petty.
Yeah, REO Speedwagon, all these people, like really huge
The
bands.
thing about Tom Petty that's very similar is that he, I heard this, okay? I don't know if it's completely accurate, but I think it is, that he like always kept his vocals dry.
Yeah.
He wasn't known for I think he was really particular about not having any reverb or something on his voice.
Yeah, I don't know. That might have started
some sort of room ambience or something. But yeah, I think he's always been very analog.
Yeah, Neil Young recorded there too in the early days, and he's all about analog to actually like an absurd extent. But fast forwarding in the story and why it had to do with like that sound not quite breaking out in the United States was so in the 80s, Sound City had all these problems as a result of digital technology coming out, the CD coming out, because people wanted to there's beginning of the loudness wars and everything, and so they had all these problems, and the band that saved them, it turns out, in the 90s was Nirvana, and they recorded I think it was In Utero there, maybe, I don't remember which one.
I think it might have been.
Was it Nevermind? I don't
think it was Nevermind. It might have been Bleach, actually.
It's the one with the baby dick on it.
Oh, that's Nevermind.
Okay. Yeah. So they come in, they record there, and they're already like a huge band at that point, and they want to record on something analog and all that sort of stuff. And they really set the tone for that time. So I think everyone was like, "Oh, we got to record at South City. We need to do this."
Yeah, that was a revival.
Yeah, and when you get these digital stuff, like Underworld and Groove Armada and the big beat stuff that happened in the 90s, people just didn't want that because they had that in the 80s already. And
well, I think I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Also, I think Dave Grohl ended up buying a lot of the equipment from
that's what that documentary is about.
That's right. Yeah. I have seen it. What were we getting to before that? I had a point to make, and I totally blew it.
We were just talking about how it didn't quite, that sound in the U.S. didn't quite blow up around that time. There was something totally different, and it was getting pushed out by, essentially rock and roll.
Well, it's something, I think we talked about this the other day, but it's, what was interesting is during those years was when I used to work for Club Med, and I actually lived in Europe for almost all the 90s. And it was interesting to see, because all my friends here in the States, what really blew up musically as far as pop music and on the radio in those days was hip hop and country music. And it was all vocal, it was all storytelling, and it was all in English. And so that stuff didn't translate. So you couldn't get it. I mean, you could hear it in Europe, but nobody cared because a huge chunk of the audience couldn't understand what the story was about. So they didn't really care, because the music itself was really simple. And it was, what was important was the rhyme and was the story and the poem. And if you didn't understand that, well, why did you care? So here, everybody was into the spoken word part of music and didn't really care so much about music. And it got really simplified. And over there, it was exactly the opposite. Music that was, you know, techno and house music, that was very much driven by the musical part of it and the emotional part of it and the vibe that it created, and not about understanding the story and the words and the lyrics. And so as a function of the English language, things were blowing up in different places totally differently. I mean, I remember going to a rave in Switzerland in like 96 or so, 97 maybe. And it was like on these tennis courts in the middle of the night, and people shooting lasers up into the bubble over the tennis courts. And it was like 145 BPM, like East German techno. And there wasn't a word in a song for 12 hours. You know, it was just vibe. Meanwhile, here in the States at that same time, everybody's listening to hip hop, and it's all about every song having exactly the same backbeat, but a totally different rhyme and lyric and story and verse. And
well, it was basically looped. It was basically looped loops of popular songs. I mean, that was the early thing. Like it wasn't really about. It was about the skill of the DJ who could take other music and kind of keep that beat. You know, that's where the break beat came from, right? You found the breaks in records, and then you had these hip hop guys that could get two copies and keep that beat just going and going and going, right?
Yep.
And then someone rapping on top of it, you know? So, I mean, it was built on kind of theft, obviously. And then producers came in and tried to recreate what was happening so that they, you know, I suppose, especially when the laws came in and everyone was getting sued, this was their way of, you know, that's when the kind of producers took the rise. But I mean, in the beginning, it was all about the DJ, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Do you remember, back around that time, it was probably around 97-ish or so. And when Daft Punk completely blew up and everybody was like, oh, these guys are amazing. These guys are amazing. And some of their biggest tracks that they had during that period were from start to finish a sample of a different song, where they didn't even take a sample and use it. They sampled an entire track and put different vocals to it and called it an original.
Yeah, they just pitched it up. Like, I forget which song it was that it really stuck out for me.
The best one.
Well, there's Robot Rock.
Robot Rock
is like, and they just keep that going for a few minutes. To, you know, it's just that loop.
I'm always reminded of that when I produce. It's like when I think I need more stuff, I'm like, well, Daft Punk became the biggest band in the world by literally stealing a sample from a disco track and pitching it up, and they just didn't even break it down. They just looped it.
Yeah, I mean, they were brilliant at revisualizing old stuff and kind of reproducing it. You know, what they did was basically they did what everyone was doing with their boom boxes anyway. Everyone was cranking the treble and cranking the bass on their boom box. It didn't matter what the song was. We wanted full on bass and full on treble. So what they do, when they flipped these samples, they just kind of gave what these kids were already trying to do with their boom boxes. And
what was interesting was, like, the hip hop guys in that time, they would take a piece. They would take a sample, a chunk, and they'd loop it, and that would be their thing, and that would be what would set the tone for the song. What was interesting about Daft Punk at that time that they totally got away with, and it's super funny to me, is that they were taking entire songs and just saying, okay, here's a different vocal on this song, but we're going to call it a totally original song, and people have completely forgotten the originals. And I just wanted to pull this up just so that you guys can hear this. This is the one that always cracks me up, and I remember playing this for my kids when we were talking about like original music and how there's so little original music out there. Is the song "Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger."
Oh yeah,
is an Edwin Birdsong song called "Cola Bottle Baby," and it is start to finish the entire song. All they did was change the vocals. And if you here, listen to this just really quick.
We could probably bring it up as like actual stream in the thing.
Oh yeah, how do you do that?
The entire song, start to finish, added an 808 behind it and changed the vocals to a vocoded vocal of something different and called it a new song. But it is like, if you lay those songs over the top of each other, it's phrase for phrase identical through the entire song.
There's this one song called "Try It Out" that's a similar song where, oh man, I wish I knew the other song off the top of my head. I guess I'll have to ask my friend. But I remember playing him. I remember him playing it in a set and me being like, "Oh, it's Try It Out," and he's like, "No, it's this other song." And I was like, "No, this is Try It Out." It's like, "No, it's not." And I'm like, "Oh, that's crazy." So that means that this other song just sampled the hell out of this song. And then I listened to it back to back, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's the same. It's literally the same song. They just paid for the master rights." And it's, I don't know. I think that's the beauty of electronic music in some ways, though.
Yeah,
is is that it introduces people to things they wouldn't hear, and it gives them new outlet, a new thing they wouldn't have discovered before, and that other artist is still getting paid, assuming it's a actual licensed thing, like Daft Punk songs, for instance. By the time they got on Atlantic or whatever they were on, they were definitely clearing those samples, so that other artist was getting paid for the music he probably wasn't getting paid for, or she wasn't getting paid for anymore. So, I don't know. I think it's kind of beautiful in some ways.
I mean, if DJing is the macro, then sampling is the micro, right? Like DJing is basically playing someone's whole song in context with other whole songs, right? I mean, for the most part, that's what we're doing. And it's the programming that tells a new story, right? It's almost like taking pages out of a bunch of different books, but seaming these pages together to tell a different story, right? And then with sampling, it's kind of like stealing paragraphs or sentences, and cutting those and rearranging those. So, I mean, we're all doing it. Everyone's been doing it for ages, I think it's just the fact that when you sample the actual song, like, even Led Zeppelin was ripping off everyone, but they weren't, it wasn't sampling, right? It was just derivative. Even if it was directly derivative, they played or replayed, just like,
Blue Monday. It's a good example.
Yeah. What was it? It's not Planet Rock. It was come on, what's the first hip hop song that
Rapper's Delight.
Rapper's Delight, Sugar Hill
Rapper's
Gang.
Delight, right. So that wasn't actually a sample. That what they did was I think they hired a band.
They did. They found those guys in a pizza shop. They found those guys in a pizza shop when
Did they really?
When there was a bunch of white record executives who wanted to make a hip hop album. They went to they went to like Staten Island, and they're like, and they just found a pizza shop with black people in it, and they're like, "Do you know any rappers?" And they're like, "We're rappers," and they're like, "Well, come get in our limo."
Yep.
we're gonna give you a record deal. And that's actually the story of the Sugar Hill Gang, which is nuts. Like, they weren't a group before; they were pizza boys.
Yeah, I mean, even Fatboy Slim did a lot of the same thing. Like, I think he directly sampled The Who, like a guitar riff, and got his ass sued off. So he ended up having to pull that. And so what he ended up doing is finding a cover band that did the song and sampling that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's interesting, so Led Zeppelin, you were talking about them. I was watching this YouTube video on why Zeppelin never sued the Beastie Boys, because when
They didn't, huh? I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
when their first album came out, what was it? License to Ill, I think it was. Rick Rubin sampled like 5 Zeppelin songs or something like that. And Led Zeppelin's someone who's notorious for the longest time, up until like Mercury or something. They weren't allowed. No one was able to sample their song in any commercials or anything. Like they just wouldn't even allow it in commercials. But they never sued the Beastie Boys because they saw it as flattery, which is kind of which I guess kind of makes sense when I say it out loud, because they were not ripping off other artists, but they were heavily
they were ripping off other artists, but
heavily interpreting.
Here's the thing is, I have to admit that I recognized, even me, grew up in the 70s, I recognized the Beastie Boys sample before I recognized the Led Zeppelin original. Like I went back to Led Zeppelin from the Beastie Boys, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you're being sampled, then it's giving new life to the original. I mean, honestly, the way I look at things is we should have like a 30-year, maybe 40-year window period. And it's like,
I think that
okay,
that's an industry thing.
I mean, you've made your money, you peaked, and you went down. Why can't someone else borrow this thing that you created that you don't need anymore, and sure, throw you a little bit of money?
Especially when you think about in music in general, there's only so many chord progressions. There's only so many, like, nothing's new. It's, and that's one of the things that I love about techno music, for example, is that because you're using really interesting, newly created sounds, you can come up with new stuff. But as far as, melodies and chord progressions and things like that, there's only so many. And so any song, you can find another song that used that same thing. So who owns it if anybody could come up with that exact same thing? And I think where the difference might lie is if you're using the artist's exact material, like you're sampling from them and you're pretending that it's something new. For me, that's kind of where it kind of crosses the line. Is it's like, okay, I'm taking somebody else's art and reselling it as new art, where there's a difference.
But isn't that what the Beastie Boys did?
Well, what the Beastie Boys did was, which is what I really respect, is they said, okay, we're going to take this other art and we're going to pay homage to this art. We're not going to try to pretend that we made this. We're going to say we're using this to come up with something new, but we didn't come up with it in the first place.
What would you define then as theft? Now here's the thing. I'm 100% supportive of sampling, because I think if you open yourself up to every possible influence, it's going to make you more creative instead of less creative. I find that there's a lot of artists that borrow from so many people, and you can look at them and go, oh, they're cheaters, they're this, they're that. But you know what? The things that they add and the things that they do, you'll find that there's some genius behind their work. Now, it might not be their very first work, but the fact that they're allowing everything to influence them gives them such a wide palette. You know what I mean? So,
and I agree. And for me, that's where the difference lies, is that if you're using things to create something else that's new and creative, I think that's amazing. Where for me, the only time that I ever really have a problem with it is it's where people represent sampled music as their own original music. And they're, if they're saying, I'm taking all these samples and I'm doing all this cool stuff with it, awesome. I think that's amazing. And it, like you said, it allows you to be even more creative. But if people are saying, oh no, that's not Led Zeppelin, I invented that. It's like, well, no, it's actually Led Zeppelin. We know it's Led Zeppelin. Just say it's
who
Led
didn't
Zeppelin,
invent that?
and I'm using it in a super cool way,
Led Zeppelin
Steal
didn't
in
invent
broad
it either.
daylight. I guess what I'm saying is steal in broad daylight. Don't lie about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think theft is. Here's the thing: is like, here's an interesting thing. All right, You guys know anything about Whales songs?
That they can travel really far. Chris knows a
right.
lot about whale songs, apparently.
Don't worry, I'll loop back. I promise I'll loop back. But,
Yeah, loop that one right there.
Whales could hear that 10,000 miles away, Chris.
no, check this out.
You feel the whales coming to Denver.
So whale songs actually have kind of like, there's an evolution of whale melodies. And what'll happen is a pack of whales will sing the same or a similar song. And over time, someone will do a slight variation and it'll evolve. And then they'll start moving towards a new melody and a new sort of thing. So the songs, by borrowing from the last creators and changing 10%, you know, over years or whatever, it's a completely different thing in the same way that humans do the same thing. So,
but are the whales representing that they created the song originally?
well, I talked to a few of them.
Plagiarist whales.
Arrogant bastards. So, you know, the bigger the whale, the bigger the asshole. That's what I heard.
So, I figure, yeah, probably because blue whales, they're assholes because they're just really blue. They're depressed.
All that plankton,
You know?
I mean, that just, yeah.
And you need a good steak, they'll cheer them right up.
Yeah, I think
But I think my point, and then I'll finish, is my point is that I think that music evolves incrementally. So we have to, in some way, borrow in the same way that inventors say, well, this thing exists and this thing exists, but this thing where we put these two technologies together doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
So it's not reinventing the wheel. We're literally putting things together. And I think that's what creativity is. So you have to have some ability to take what's been to create something new. So it's almost like you put your spin on. I mean, what if paintings couldn't use a square frame because one person did it and now no one else can do it? Only one artist could use a square frame. Like, or what if only one artist put out a CD? Now no one else can do CDs because it's no longer original, right? I mean, how far do you want to take what you do and still call yourself an artist? Like we're stealing from so many technologies as it is. Every tool we use, every digital thing we use, unless we invented it ourselves. And then if we invented the tool, did we invent the computer that runs the tool? Like, how far back do you want to go before you just admit, this isn't all me?
I saw a really funny thing about that. A very funny thing about that once, where they said that, you know, it was about people trying to one up each other, kind of in a hipster way of saying, well, I do this. Oh yeah, well, I do this. And they were like, well, I use digital drums. Oh yeah, well, I sample real drums. Oh yeah, well, I actually play and record real drums. Oh yeah, well, I make my drums and then I record them. Oh yeah, well, I actually take the leather and make the drum head. Oh yeah, well, I grow the goat that makes the leather.
I've seen this, yeah.
Does this. And it just gets to be that thing where it's like one up. It's kind of like DJ equipment.
Well, then at the end of the joke, you forget the punchline.
Yeah, you forget the punchline. Yeah.
Yeah, the punchline's the best part.
It's the best part, yeah.
Go for it.
No,
go ahead.
No, you go for it. You had to bring it up. We all know the punchline, but not everyone.
The punchline is
the five people who will watch this don't know the punchline.
I'm too busy making the equipment to actually make music.
No, I'm too busy goat farming.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I haven't really made a lot of music lately because I'm too busy raising all these goats.
Exactly. It's funny because that same conversation.
Yeah, it's a punchline.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm old and I just kind of crack up with some years of perspective. But the whole idea about people like trying to one up each other about what equipment they use when they DJ or produce or whatever, I can't possibly roll my eyes far enough into the back of my head when people start talking about shit like that, because it's just like, holy shit, like. It doesn't matter if what you make sounds good. That's the point. I don't care how you made it or how you played it or how you DJ'd it. And a friend of mine, I remember.
Neither does most people.
Yeah, I remember that somebody posted a while back on social media the thing that it was a picture of a Techniques, and it said everyone's a DJ until you put one of these in front of them. And my friend's response was a picture of a rotary telephone, and it said everyone can make a call until you put one of these in front of them.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
remember.
the same perspective. It's like, well, technology has moved on, so we shouldn't be riding horses because there's cars. We shouldn't be doing like. Yeah, you can.
Want to know what the
horses,
shitty?
and that's awesome. But
You know what the shitty thing about this?
Chris,
whole,
your mic is really low. I think that's why you're not cutting in.
Oh yeah, you get that mic up there.
Yeah, you sound really quiet because I realize you keep on getting cut. You sound muffled. Because I'm like,
I mean, he might be a quiet
cut
guy. He just.
I don't know.
No, I don't think so. No, not really. You sound quiet. That you have a nice webcam, but a shitty microphone.
Oh man, that must be an Apple thing.
Yeah. Do you have like earbuds? Because that's what I do for mine. Because I have a similar problem.
I don't know. Let me see.
Like with the microphone on it, because I want to get you in this, and I feel like you're saying
for sure.
stuff, and you don't. And we're all kind of fighting for airspace, but we got the superior mic. So Jason over here has got the winner with his drop down.
Oh, so I'm the bastard. I'm the asshole, right? I'm the big whale.
I'm not gonna. Yeah, you're the blue whale for sure.
So,
do you have a microphone on
that, Chris? What I wanted to say about the DJ thing is
nope. No.
What about now?
Let's see.
Well, wait. Let's see.
Check.
Yeah, it's a little better.
You're
A little
louder.
better. You got to keep it next to your face a little bit, but you can adjust the microphone settings on. If you see that mute button, there should be an audio. There should be a little like up arrow next to the mute button on its right. If you go to audio settings, you should be able to turn up your microphone input level. Mine's default really low, so I'm assuming yours is probably default really low too.
Is that in Zoom or does he got to go to his Apple
Zoom?
phone?
Zoom. This is
You
Zoom.
can do it in Zoom. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
This is interesting. Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. You actually sound a little better.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, because I was like, I wasn't sure. I'm like, I don't think Chris is that quiet. We need to get this figured out.
No, yeah. I've been saying.
Shut the fuck up after let you talk.
I've been saying ha-has and yeah, that's right, and I'm with Eric on this one too.
Yeah, I haven't heard any of that. Yeah, okay, cool.
Oh man.
All right, well, remember to do technical shit beforehand. All right, well, I'm glad we got that figured out.
DJs. We don't.
Oh man.
Oh no, yeah. We're doing. We're
Wait,
sampling Chris leaving.
What beers we're drinking? Like, isn't that like what we're supposed to do?
I'm not drinking beer. I'm drinking wine, like a
now we're gonna trash you.
Yeah.
So isn't it interesting?
Read between the wines.
I love it.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Isn't it
White Rascal.
White Rascal. Oh, where's that from? No, I'm kidding.
Oh, White Rascal's the bomb, dude.
Yeah, I like that.
I think Eric introduced me to White Rascal, and I've been hooked on it for like a really good time now.
Yeah, Avery.
Could be. It's my go-to.
It's a triple, right? Belgian triple or something like that, or it's a Belgian
it's actually
style.
a wit.
It's a wit. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know about all that, but I know it's good.
It's very.
You just gotta get it. You gotta get it out of the can, though. Pour that thing in a glass, buddy.
Yeah.
You don't want that metallic.
Yeah, no, I actually do have the glass here.
Oh, okay, got it. All right, cool.
Hey, look at that! Now I gotta go to the store and get me a
I'm not a
glass.
savage.
Right.
I mean, you was gonna call this, and I'm still considering it.
Hey, come on now. Come on now, guys.
It's got a can. Yeah. It keeps the carbonation in. I wanted to call this thing degenerates. It's about like DJ enerates is what I was thinking. And I was like, I don't want to but at the same time, I was like, I don't want to impose on people about who they are. But I don't know if we're all drinking, I guess so. Who are we kidding? We all make electronic music. We're all degenerates as far as society's concerned.
So one of the things we haven't really talked much about is making music, and I know we were originally talking about a little bit about this stuff, and I just want to say something because this came up prior to when we started the recording here, but a shout out to Jason for having a #1 this week, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're the #1 on what? Beatport?
No,
on Bandcamp.
on Bandcamp.
On Bandcamp.
Yeah,
Even better. I like them way more than Beatport.
Well, I mean, I'm not #1 of all Beatport, obviously.
But your genre or whatever.
Yeah, which is really interesting because it's a new genre for me and what have you.
Is it
What
the
did
is it
they-
the new wave sort of shit?
Well, I mean, since we're
I
on
want
the
to make one
topic,
point before I get to any of that about the DJ thing, and then let's get into whatever you want to talk about producing. But isn't it interesting that DJs, vinyl DJs, started being considered non-musicians and really shit on by proper musicians, guitarists,
Oh,
Like
everyone always
so-
has to be superior to somebody.
Well, this is my point. Is so these guys got
You'll never be a
shit.
real pianist unless you're a classical pianist.
These guys got
Yeah.
shit on. They got really good at what they did anyway, and then they built their own pride. And then what do? They shit on the next generation. And then the
Oh.
CD DJs.
You know what it is?
You got
Is it's
shit on.
that thing that we
Shit
it's
on
that thing that we
the-
breed into people in high school.
It's really curious to me that if you felt like shitty from someone else shitting on your art, and you go and you perpetuate that to the next generation. I mean, aren't you the same guy as a musician who was shitting on you? You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we perpetuate that from high school, where everybody shits on the freshmen, and then as soon as someone's not a freshman, well, they're going to shit on the freshman again because it's
the
their
next
turn.
the next
You know,
year,
and it just
whatever, yeah.
it's always been ridiculous to me.
Have you ever
Yeah,
seen
that's
that?
true.
Do you guys remember that Facebook? You guys have probably seen it. You're all familiar with like the
What's this
Facebook live
Facebook thing
sets.
you're
It's this thing created by an autistic megalomaniac who has billions of dollars.
oh, whoa, what?
You know, Mark Zuckerberg,
Yeah, that guy.
autistic megalomaniac with billions of
Yeah.
dollars, where a bunch of people, you know, hit their faces with books. It's crazy. But there's this thing. You guys all know the thing. It was started by some local people. Facebook live sets under quarantine. And there was a thread that went in there, and I'm actually trying to find it at the moment. But they're talking about this exact same thing, and has a huge sample size of, you know, this group is like 20,000 DJs more or less, and has a really big sample size of people who are commenting on this. And you guys are right. Like, people are huge shit talkers, and there's this. My favorite comment, which is buried really far in there, really innocuously, is by this guy named Ben Jordan, who professionally goes by the Flashbulb, and he makes IDM. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but
But I do know IDM.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's like savant level sort of musician, and he's the sort of person who made like really insane like breakcore IDM on like one of those old like Casio sampler sort of things. And
Sounds kind of
very
like
huge.
James Holden.
Yeah, well, I mean, even older than James Holden in some respects, you know, but similar mentality where they're just like really brilliant.
Mhm.
Like, he makes the music that he makes now, he knows how to make music from like neurofeedback. So he creates like sensors that he puts on his head and all this sort of stuff to
Oh, yeah,
do
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And you can do all this crazy sort of stuff. He's like a really good guitar player and pianist and technologist and field recorder, and, you know, hangs out with people like Richard Devine and stuff like that. Anyways, this guy who has a chance to shit on anyone because of how musically advanced he is, like he's a classically trained pianist and makes electronic music. He was like, you know, at the end of the day, you're all just people playing other people's music. So I don't understand what your high horse is all about, is essentially what he said. And
also, yeah, is it not legitimate to play vinyl when the recording that was created and put on vinyl was done on a computer?
Yeah, you know, this. Yeah, I always had this problem.
Don't get me started.
Don't get me started either.
That's what cracks
How many
me up
songs
is-
that are on vinyl were like created and crafted
on a computer?
On a computer, right? Like,
yeah.
It's
right.
silly. I mean,
and then even if they were crafted, totally
and I'm not
with
anti-vinyl at all. I love it, and I actually, you know, I'm
really anti-vinyl.
Feel of it, but I
actually
didn't know about vinyl when I moved here to Colorado, except for like a couple boxes, just because for me, the format is not the most important aspect, you know? And it's not actually, it's not even really, although I could respect people that have incredible technique to their mixing skills. I think at the end of the day, what's most important to me is great programming. I would rather hear a fairly shit DJ that doesn't have a whole lot of technical skills, but has incredible taste in music.
Yeah.
Right? So that is always going to trump for me people who could technically mix garbage music.
Yep, the best DJs are the ones who know what to play and when to play it.
Yeah, now if you get
no matter how you play it.
You get both of those correctly.
What were you saying, Chris?
Oh, so question, like what he was just saying, like how about like you liked like kind of like sets, right? You have program sets, and then you have like people that can do it off the top of their head because they know their whole entire library, right?
Sure. Okay.
But then you have like let's say these people that get paid like $5,000 for one night of booking, or 10,000, or whatever that amount is, and then when you go and listen to them live, right? The way they blend in and mix in other tracks sounds kind of like a chop, like when the next track is in. Now, should that be something to be looked at and analyzed, the headliner or the person that does it?
I think.
But I would ask the question. Does it affect the night?
No, I mean,
because
for me, it does.
Amazing DJs who don't have great skills, but they're amazing DJs because of how they program.
Okay,
right.
So check this out. Okay, what was his name? David. So he died recently. You guys ever heard of
Eric Morello?
No, he just died like 2 days ago.
Yeah, no. David. I don't know.
Or yesterday.
I forget his name. I have seen him. But he ran in New York a club, which was actually a loft. Have you ever heard?
Oh, is this the one where it was an actual loft? I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was an actual loft. Now check this out.
Yeah,
First,
in New York City, and he had like they were talking about some of the last DJs and beers.
Well,
all this shit was plagiarist.
So the very first thing is he invented, in a way, the super club sound system. Even though he just had a loft, he did something that everyone thought was crazy, which was put really high frequency tweeters that didn't point at your ears, but pointed kind of just above your head, sort of thing. And like he did some really interesting things with sound. And
is this a Paradise Garage guy?
No, not the same guy. Not the same, but the same time period ish. I think the Paradise Garage came after this guy from the Loft.
Okay.
And he started kind of like a Studio 54 way, where he invited a bunch of celebrities. He had the punch bowl or whatever with the LSD, and would hang out and sit around in, I don't know, I assume like throw pillows or stuff like that. And he would play all night into the morning records. Now his thing was fidelity and programming. And the thing that a lot of people don't know about him is he never mixed a song. He would play one song all the way through on one record, and then start the other song and play the other song through. And then when I saw him live, he did the exact same thing. Some amazing, amazing sound, no mixing, right? But here's the thing. Did the mixing or not mixing take away from the experience? Well, some people said they had legendary nights. Now, sure, adapting into mixing as the next step to that can be incredible in its own way. But are we going to take away from the fact that this guy created something and almost invented something out of playing other people's music in a certain order to create a certain mood for an extended amount of time?
Apparently that's what Plastic People did. And that's how, Plastic People were, like Forte and Code 9 and all these people. I think Code 9 came from it. But Floating Points, all these people came out of, and the guy who ran the club had a similar philosophy, and his whole thing would be about fidelity, and the second part would be about programming. And people will always say this guy who didn't make music, who's a club founder, all these, DJs, Floating Points is the main one who comes to mind. He always said that he was his favorite DJ because what he would do, he didn't know how to mix. That wasn't really his thing. He would play records more or less front to back and they would just kind of be records. They wouldn't necessarily be, it would be maybe you would have a Surgeon track, but then that Surgeon track went into an extended Sun Ra sort of thing. And, you know, maybe the Sun Ra thing went back into, you know, some sort of other, you know, techno or, you know, garage or whatever was popular at the time. But then he would be like, okay, I'm going to play some bolero and play some classical music now.
Right.
And he just knew how to program.
I think it's that question of if you are paying attention and always asking the question, what is this guy going to play next? And then he plays it and you're like, wow, what is he going to play next?
Exactly.
Wow. That to me is now, of course, I love the idea of seamless blending where you're like, how did we even get here? Which is another level. But I think if you had to choose between someone who blended perfectly transparent mixes, but the programming wasn't there, then I would prefer the other.
Me too.
If you have someone that can do
And I think
both,
that
then you have, I think, another level that can bring songs. I mean, I remember watching DJs and going, what is that track? What is that track? What is that track? It sounds amazing. And you realize that you've had that track for 3 years and you never played it because you didn't think it would work, right?
Right.
And it sounded so much better when they played it. You didn't know what the hell they did, but somehow, you know, now that's obviously a nice sound system helps, but I think there's a skill to crafting a mix so that things sound. When you can make a small track sound huge, that's a skill, right?
Right. Right.
Because if you're just a guy who plays one big track after another big track, then over a certain amount of time, everything's just going to sound small because there's nothing big to compare it to, right? So it might sound big the first 3 songs, and then after that, since you can't get any bigger, it just starts sounding small.
Do you guys remember, do you guys know the Jamie XX controversy that happened in Denver at Vinyl?
No,
You
tell me.
guys know about that? So Jamie XX, who, you know, Mercury Prize winning producer, even at this point, big deal. Vinyl wouldn't let him play a Friday night because he, you know, would get too experimental or something like that, and they didn't want to take that risk, you know, Vinyl being Vinyl. Not that his experimental stuff would sound good coming out of the shittiest sound system in the world, but I digress. So his manager like lost his shit on, you know, Vinyl and, you know, Live Nation and all that sort of stuff, and was like, you know, we're just not going to play here anymore. Like, good luck getting anyone here. This guy's a Mercury Prize winning, you know, DJ. Sure. People respect the hell out of him. He's a pop sensation. You don't want him to play your shitty little Denver club because, you know, he might get too experimental. You know what? Fuck you is essentially the message. And so they had to rally quick. And I assume I'm guessing this next step, but about a year later, he's co-headlining Red Rocks with Chromeo. And, you know.
Chromeo, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to say one thing about Chromeo.
Well, really
Let me
quick.
go off topic real quick with Chromeo.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to plant this in your head.
Uh-huh.
Chromeo needs to produce the next Madonna album.
I would dig that.
That would bring her completely back because she's gone to shit. Chromeo could fix that. Okay.
Her new stuff with Dua Lipa is actually really cool. But anyways, I digress. I just need to get to this, finish my point really quick so people who might watch this don't get distracted. Because you know how it is. So he played an all vinyl set, and his program was fantastic. Like he played like all this, he opened the sets with like all this like African sort of music, and he played Idris Muhammad, and he played like some old Oxia tracks, and he played like techno and all this stuff, and he was all over the place. And everyone at that set, even people who weren't Jamie XX fans I was talking about, were like, that was infinitely better than Chromeo. And I'm looking at the vinyl programmers who like choose their program because this guy might quote unquote get too experimental. He blew the way he overshadowed, in the opinions of many people who I talked to after that show, who aren't even like techno heads or whatever. He overshadowed Chromeo, the headliner, because
Which
he
that's what
went and he
great programming
programmed
can
his
do.
stuff.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, for example, talk about experimental. What about like Kid Koala? Are you familiar with Kid Koala at all?
Yeah, he's on Ninja Tune, right?
I believe so. But he toured with Radiohead, and he did some really weird, DJ sets and stuff like that.
So did
Very
James
experimental.
Holden.
Like, it's really kind of depressing to me that a club doesn't want to innovate and sure, give the people what they want most of the time. But if you want to take things and you want to be the first to take things to the next level, then you have to risk. You have to take risk, right? And I think it's worth it, especially if you've got someone like a Jamie XX. They got enough of a following where that's a perfect opportunity. They're not going to have some local guy like me do something really weird and wild because no one's going to show up for it, right? But if they want to keep pushing the envelope, why not let people that clearly have an audience, like, kind of pave that way for other artists who are smaller to come in and create new.
What about scenes that don't really quite have a sound yet, and don't necessarily have that sort of burden of there's people who are defining it? Like, I know in Denver, for instance, we got a thriving electronic music scene as far as the people we bring in, but as far as the people we export, more or less, for the amount of venues that we have and frankly the artists who play here is disproportional, at least in my opinion. Do you think that Denver could benefit from people who, like yourself or Eric or Chris here, who would go and decide to take those experimental chances because nothing's been defined yet, or do you think that's too big of a risk?
I don't know. I think here's the thing. I think if it's a guy like me or Eric or any of us, I think that we need to kind of split the risk and either lower our charge or of some sort to say, I want to try something, or we need to be a big part of helping the promotion side of things. Like, if you are going to do something that could potentially lose money for a club because you don't have a big enough name, then it's kind of your job to be a better promoter of yourself, right? I mean, as sad as that seems, and it doesn't seem very artistic, I think there needs to be a balance. That's why sometimes another artist who has a bigger name needs to be able to kind of spearhead and kind of open the doors for a bigger audience that are willing to come back to see another artist do something similar in a genre. What do you think, Christian?
I would just add, we talked about, from, as somebody who's a partner in a club before, I can talk a little bit about the club owner perspective. And where you run into some real difficulties is that for people like us who are in music and into music, we could say, oh yeah, well, everybody knows that artist. Oh yeah, well, everybody knows this person. Or, oh yeah, I would totally go see that person. But the reality of it is that we are a small niche within a small niche within a small niche.
Sure.
And so you have artists out there that maybe they're huge somewhere else, or maybe they're huge within the music community, or maybe they're huge within a certain genre or a certain niche of the music community. But that's not enough for the club owner to not only justify their fee, but to even justify spending a night of their potential revenue generating on somebody who may or may not generate any revenue for the club. And the sad part about it is, well, there's two sad things that I'll mention about this. The first sad thing about it is that the vast majority of the people who want to come see these really great, fantastic international artists, we talked about Community, the people that want to go see the Community artists, the sad part is the majority of the people that want to see them don't want to pay for a ticket. They want to get on a free guest list. They want to get brought in by their buddy, or it's like, well, I don't pay for shows. I get on the guest list. So the club doesn't make any money there. Then they get in and they don't spend any money at the bar. And so then the club hasn't made any money. And unfortunately, they've got rent to pay and staff to pay. And the second sad part about that is that the, you know, I mentioned this when we talked the other day, that unfortunately what drives those decisions about what's allowed, what a club, whether it's, you know, vinyl or, you know, the old Beta or even Black Box now, or any club, it doesn't matter where it is. I mean, Chris, you're from Miami. All the Miami clubs are exactly the same way. What drives the decision-making process for the club owner is, are they going to be able to make enough money to pay their rent? You know, my day job is in restaurant consulting. And I can tell you that a well-run restaurant or bar makes between 10 and 15% profit of what they make top line, if they're doing it right.
I was going to say, that sounds high.
If they're full every Friday, Saturday, and if they minimize their costs the rest of the week, they're going to make about 10%. So if you think about that,
it's kind of like a supermarket.
You know, if the amount of money that there is to be made is really slim. So the only way a club or a club owner is going to take the risk to book somebody who they're not sure is going to pay the bills, the only way they're going to do that is if the audience, the customers that come into their club demand it. And if they say, I want to see these artists and I will support by buying a ticket and spending money at the bar, then every club owner in the world wants to bring in good music. Every club owner in the world wants to have people who talk about and buzz about their club being the coolest spot and the cutting edge place and whatever. But the reality is that the only people who drive that are the end consumer. And if that end consumer isn't willing to turn up and on a regular basis and pay for a ticket on a regular basis, the club owner's got to pay the bills. So if I know that I've only got a certain amount of Friday nights and Saturday nights in my year, and I know that I need to make a certain amount of money to pay my rent, I'm going to book sure things, or as close to a sure thing as I can get. And that's where the club owner, you know, to play devil's advocate for a second, that's where the club owner goes, you know what, don't get too weird on me, because if I start to get the reputation that I've got weird music, my people that come every week and spend money at the bar are going to stop coming.
But
so
what
you
about
gotta play
the
music that's going to keep people coming back?
So,
Unless you create an image for your club that's the music you play on a certain night or in a certain club, such that the customers turn up on a regular basis and pay money for it, then you're going to book great artists. And that's why these great clubs can book great artists, because they've developed that reputation over years.
Well, in Denver specifically, we're known, or Colorado, I should say, more so than Boulder when this was first starting to happen in like 2008, right around there, where acts like the Glitch Bob and, you know, Bass Nectar and, you know, all those people, Blue Tech and, you know, that sort of scene was coming up, Spangle, all that sort of stuff. That was some really, now it's so normal and whatever, but back then that was some threatening fucking music, if you think about it, in 2008. Like, that was not like conventional music whatsoever. That was some out there, bendy sort of sounding stuff. You know, no one was really making, you know, that sort of music, especially in Colorado, you know, where the biggest band out here was like String Cheese, and then like the remnants of Firefly from the 70s and 80s. You know, it wasn't so much that sort of sound. But, you know, really quickly, that sound blew up and was demanded in a lot of clubs in Colorado. What do you think? How did that happen?
I got to tell you from firsthand experience, we opened Absinthe House in Boulder in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
remember
right in that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a whole bunch of people saying, you need more bass music, because that's what's the thing. Okay, great. So we tried bass music. And the problem is that everybody wanted bass music, but the bass music crowd didn't want to pay for a cover charge. And then once they got in, they didn't want to buy a drink because they weren't drinking.
They're eating drugs.
That crowd wasn't a drinking crowd. So all of a sudden, we have this 11,000 square foot place that has $22,000 a month in rent. And how are we paying the bills when nobody's buying any drinks at the bar and no one wants to pay a cover charge? So all of a sudden, we have no choice but to do Thursday nights, DJ PD, pack them in. And, you know, we could do 20,000 in sales at the bar on a Thursday night, where we could bring in a huge bass music act and get no cover charge and maybe do $3,000 or $4,000 at the bar.
Huh? What?
And
How
so
did like the Fox and the
you
Boulder
have to pay
Theater
the rent.
make money then? Like, because they always had bass acts and stuff like that. Do you think it was just because of their branding? Because like the Fox got away.
So
with
they
it.
had what the Fox and the Boulder Theater did. They had a couple of different things that they did. First and foremost, they owned the real estate, so they didn't have rent. So they didn't have to worry about making a rent payment every month. They bought these buildings years ago and they owned them outright. So
they didn't have a mortgage anymore.
So their largest overhead was already gone. And then what they did was the Fox and the Boulder Theater, if you remember, the only way that they would do acts was by ticket sales. And there was this mentality of people that I'll pay for a ticket to see a show in a theater. I'll pay for a ticket to see a show at Red Rocks or in a venue or in an arena, but I won't pay a ticket to see a show in a club or a bar. I'll get on the guest list. And so instantly, I mean, we had artists just to, you know, we talked about this the other day. You were in Boulder at that time and you didn't even know the artists that we had because
in the back room,
there was no buzz. There was no buzz around it, but we had, I mean, I had Stonebridge play who wrote Show Me Love. I mean, like, talk about house music legends. We had
That's
Oscar
my homie.
L, if you're in the techno scene.
That's your homie?
Oscar L.
Hell yeah.
You know, Oscar L played at Absinthe House. We had, you know, this was like the beginning heyday of EDM, and we had Thomas Gold played Absinthe House. We had, like, these were artists who were huge in what they did and still weren't drawing a crowd because people were saying, well, no, I don't go see things like that in a club. I see things like that either in an arena or not at all. And if I'm going to see them in a club, well, I'm not going to pay a cover charge.
Oh, so it's a branding issue.
No.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Well,
here's the thing. Like, I was just thinking of a couple things. DJ3, who is probably among one of my favorite DJs because he's so eclectic. I recall him playing beta to like 20 people, right? Like no one showed up for him. And I knew the next gig he played was going to be packed, right? So I'm not saying that's necessarily a negative on Denver. I don't know what the issue is, but just because someone doesn't show up at one venue doesn't mean that they're not a relevant artist, right? But the venue has to do a certain amount of work for an artist. And I agree with you, Eric, that there needs to be a balance, you know, that then again, you've got like Sasha and John Digweed. I saw them in Las Vegas. Las Vegas is not a venue, you know, it's not a place to see those kind of DJs. The place was half packed, you know. So you can, an artist can be legendary, but the venue can be the wrong space, or the promoter could be misinterpreting their audience, right? And also expecting a name is going to sell the tickets as opposed to promotion, right?
And I think that, you know, misinterpreting the audience goes back to what I was mentioning before, which is that you have to understand what audience is going to pay the bills. And I think that that's where you run into some of these issues where, you know, we would love to see, you know, these huge artists play in certain venues, and we could totally see them play there.
But are they actually huge for that venue? Are they actually going to be huge when you book them automatically? Is there a built?
And that's, well, the thing is are people going to pay to see them? That's the key.
So,
you know, like, okay, I'll give you an example. You were talking about seeing DJ3 at Beta for no people. This was probably 2013, 2014 or so. Mm-hmm. I remember going to Beta, and they had Carl Cox at Beta, and it was a show that was put on by Red Bull that they sponsored. They put out massive amount of money for it, and they ended up giving away tickets for free because they couldn't sell them. And then they ended up, even with giving away tickets for free, there was probably less than 100 people in Beta for Carl Cox.
Isn't that interesting?
And so,
Wow.
and so it's just a matter of the people at that time period, you know, in 2013, the crowd that was spending money wasn't spending money on Carl Cox. The crowd that was spending money was spending money on, you know, Pretty Lights or Bass Nectar or something else. It wasn't, you know, they were buying tickets for that, and they weren't spending money at the bar.
So that kind of gives me the so in Colorado specifically, that's I think is really interesting is how they got around that in a lot of ways with the bass scene is like jam bands and everything were really big in Colorado, and bands like the String Cheese Incident and the Disco Biscuits and Lotus and stuff like that were big before, you know, EDM or whatever was the thing. And they started making set breaks for their openers, these electronic acts, these huge electronic acts that weren't really big. And, you know, you would get like Rusco opening for the Biscuits, or you would have, you know, same with someone like Bass Nectar would always play with like String Cheese, and also with the Disco Biscuits and with Sound Tribe, and you always play like set breaks and stuff like that. And then, you know, did that for like 4 years. And then next thing you know, they're playing venues twice the size. And I think, and you see promoters in Colorado who are a little newer than that, like Euphonic Conceptions is a good example. They do Wednesday nights at Cervantes, and now they do Thursdays. And their thing is like heady bass music and jam bands. And they will like intermingle the two. And you go on a Wednesday night and that thing sold the fuck out on a Wednesday night.
Colorado really seems to have a psychedelic and jam band and psychedelic electronic scene.
They should. We should also do that from this side too.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah,
Come on, Christian.
So one of the things that I've noticed, like from Denver, Miami, Texas, and like Nashville and all that, that separates the United States from being popular overseas is when you're in overseas, you have these promoters and DJs that already have their rep, and they're known for certain skills and certain tracks and certain atmospheres. But one of the things that they improve on that the United States doesn't, but they try and fail because somehow it's related to greed or ego or something like that, is they have really good, just open public outdoorsy events, just spontaneous. And if you try to do that here in the States, you have to go through legal forms, permissions, and all this. And you'll have complaints, you'll have noise complaints, you'll have people, you know.
There's a good amount of red tape, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like so much limitations. And overseas, you can go and play in front, like Carl Cox, he goes and plays in front of a castle. And sure, there's not a lot of people, but there's a lot of people tuned in just because of that. You know, so if we're talking about structuring a state like Denver to grow, which it is, I mean, for me, my observation is that Denver is kind of leading the way America is right now because Miami's not doing it. And Miami's a little too political, cliquey, and they restrict themselves. You know, they're too out there. But Denver, if you notice, they're on the we're on the map a lot more than other states and other events. Same with
especially
Las
for
Vegas.
Size,
especially for their size, correct. So one of the things that I've noticed from there is if we wanted to branch out more and push our local talents even more to open up for these big acts, then we should be the first steps into providing that kind of atmosphere, inviting people from 80 years old and 70-year-olds that are walking by the park, and then they're noticing this noise and they just walk in freely just to see what it is, just to enjoy it.
We get a viral grandma dancing sort of
Right?
thing in Denver.
And then instantly what does anybody do in the market and off the market and just everyday life? They go on their phone and be like, oh, what is this? Who is this guy? Oh, look, this guy's playing at this place for no reason, you know, and it sparks.
Yeah, I think that the solution to what we're saying about more experimental artists is not going to come from our bigger clubs. It's going to come, it's going to come from the DIY scene, which is kind of where everything new starts. And we need to understand that, because with the DIY, they do it on a shoestring budget, and no one expects to make money really there. So they're really bringing in artists that they give a shit about, or they want to give an opportunity to. And when you could be a bigger act in the DIY scene, then you could kind of take this group and say, hey, let's take it to a medium size. Let's take it to a bigger size. Will you follow me? Will you follow me over here? Will you spend the $10 here? I know that over here you only paid $5 or $3 or whatever. Will you support what we're doing? But I think that everything needs to start from there. I mean, have any of you guys been in bands, like non-electronic bands? Have you, anyone?
Yeah. I've been in high school.
Okay,
I mean,
so you've been in
which
a high
sucked,
school band.
but
Yes.
yeah.
You have as well?
I also played in like jazz band and stuff like that for high
Okay,
school
awesome.
and stuff like that.
I-
Play saxophone.
At one point in my life in Nashville, I was best friends with like a group of people or kids that I went to school with, and they were a band. But randomly, I would go into this thing that was called the Patch. We named it the Patch because it was like a group of 20 or so of us, and we would always go there. And it was a friend of mine's garage, so they would always play on the band, but I would always dabble in the keyboard and just make weird sounds to see if it'll fill in.
Cool. Okay, so you kind of have a little bit of experimentation with other people.
It's the communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the point that I'm making is, let's look at things not as electronic artists. Let's look at things as like a band, okay? No one is going to let your band play unless you can bring people. It doesn't matter the style. And here's the thing. There really isn't usually a prejudice on style. There's a prejudice on your ability to bring people or not bring people. For example, when I was younger, right, and we hated this, and I don't know that I agree with it or not, but you know, when I was like 18, 19, 20, you know, we would play bigger clubs in Hollywood, but we had to pay. Here's what we had to do. We had to pay, I believe, let's say $5 a ticket. So we had to buy like 200 tickets, all right, at $5 a piece. And we had to sell, we could sell those for whatever we wanted, right? 10 to 15 bucks or whatever. But here's the thing. The club wouldn't lose money if we didn't sell the tickets. We had to already pay. So the club got paid up front for the tickets. We had to work our asses off to actually get asses into the club, right? That was kind of part of the job.
Right.
I know it's not a very artistic thing to say, but you know,
But that's just how it is. Kanye West is huge because you can do
this
that.
is what
it's just the old school way of doing it.
Hollywood. This is what Motley Crue had to do. This is what so many bands had to do. Is they first, probably what they did was they lived a bit of a party life, so they would throw parties all the time, and every once in a while they'd play house parties. And you know, back in the day, hundreds of people would show up to these house parties or whatever, right? So that's kind of where you started.
Some even did it in the garage.
Exactly. Well, these house parties were in the garage a lot of times, right? Yeah. And so they built up enough, like, hey, come see us play at the Roxy, or come see us play at the Whiskey, or whatever. You know, that was LA. But the fact of the matter is, there was like a little bit of excitement, like these people that came to your garage were kind of like, well, this is my band and I believe in them. I want to be one of the first people there. So you get your core 100 people or 70 people to come out and see you play. Now, DJs don't really have this sort of ethic anymore. And I'm not saying that I'm any less lazy than anyone else, but you know, I think the problem is that DJs don't really see a return on their time and effort investment like a band might. scene.
Well, there's also 4 people in a band, and there's 1 person who's a DJ. So when you're a band, you have
true.
4
So
different arms going out, and one of them is going to pull 70% of that because, you know, it's just how it is, you know, the 80-20 sort of rule.
I mean, I'm not saying
So-
that once you become a medium size or bigger DJ that you should have to hustle for every fan you get in every city. But when you want to build a reputation, you start in your own city and you build from the ground up. And that's how you would get shows, right? You get shows 2 ways. They like your music and they believe in you, or you could bring asses, hopefully a combination of both. And you're not going to get paid too much the first couple times. But when people come back and they want your band again, now you flip the script. Now
Yeah,
they
that's
need
right.
you more than you need them, sort of thing, right? But this is the way it has to start. You have to start that snowball. So those guys that are just throwing you scraps, doesn't matter that they're throwing you scraps, they're giving you an opportunity to gain power in your artistry. When you grow your audience to a certain level, you pass that threshold. And now you have kind of a bit of the upper hand. And that's why certain artists get paid so much, not because promoters want to pay so much money, but because you're actually worth it, right? They know they'll make more. There's no reason that someone would spend 20 grand on you unless they thought they could make 40, right?
Mhm.
So,
No, absolutely not.
but I think it all has to start. And I think that even bands today, it's the same sort of ethic. You know, they're building their name on Spotify or however they're doing it online through Facebook and what have you. And DJs are not really building their audience. They think their talent alone is going to get them there. And just like a band, you won't be heard until you ask to be heard to start. You know, then when you the exponential growth after you do the work, that will create kind of the scale tipping, and pretty soon you can focus on your artistry and other people will recognize you enough to put a bunch of promo into you because they know they can make money.
Back then though, was that done mainly through the venue, or was that done through a promoter that was throwing that night and you buy the tickets from the promoter? Because
probably a promoter was in between as well. I mean, it
Okay.
just, you know, you might have a promoter that's doing like a Thursday night at a big club, right? So they've got some deal. So they're going to take the tickets. They're going to sell those tickets to you. They're going to say, you sell those tickets if you want to make money. We've already made money. Part of that money goes to the club. Part of the money goes to the promoter. And then, of course, they make money in their sales. And as a band, now this is what I think is really idiotic, is with a band, you can make more of your money from merchandise. Every band would have a merch table. Why don't DJs have a merch table?
DJs don't have merch. I think it's like this, you know what?
I'm working on mine.
As you should. I mean, I think it's like one of those things that
I mean, if
I
you're
don't
not
know what
making
DJs.
music,
Like,
I know there's not
there's
a
a
lot
certain
to tell,
like
but
there's like this certain attitude amongst DJs that like you said before, that their talent alone or whatever is going to bring them the gigs, and they
I
just have
gotta say
something
though,
solo venture.
I gotta say though, the having been in bands a lot in high school and college, and then switched over and been more in DJing, the 2 things that I see that are really different between those 2 kind of cultures and work ethics, like you said, is that, you know, if you were to take a city block in downtown Denver and you were to go door to door and ask anybody if they're in a band, you might find 1 band in a city block, but you'd probably find 100 DJs in that city block. So
it's true. It's true.
It is true.
Too many
pool of
DJs.
crowds, like that 1 band is going to be able to build up a crowd that it would take 100 DJs to build up that same crowd, because there's just not as many of them. And that's one part of it. And then I also think that one of the things that grows out of that culture, and I think it's one of the reasons why so many electronic scenes have kind of pushed back against that idea, is that what it does is it perpetuates constantly seeing exactly the same local artists all the time. because that artist has the following. So any promoter that's going to book somebody that wants to book someone that's going to fill their club and put asses in seats, it's going to book that same artist all the time. And so it's one of the things that Global fell into in Denver. And it's why anytime you look at any global event in Denver, the local lineup is identical in 2019 as it was in 2015, as it was in 2010. It's the exact same DJs, because those are the people who will get out there and sell tickets for their spot. And so the promoter goes, okay, well, these guys will sell tickets for the spot, so I'm going to give them the spot, because these other DJs won't do that. And even if they say they will, they don't have the following. And so that's why you see the exact same people at all those events.
It is kind of interesting that the warm-up DJs are actually the promoters for the big DJ. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, in a lot of
and that's
cases.
that's the way it is locally all the
Everywhere.
time.
Yeah,
Everywhere.
Nocturnal.
And that's one of the reasons why I think that the DJs kind of push back against it a bit, is that, you know, there are promoters in this town right now who, and they're bringing in big name artists. And if you look at the openers on their shows, every single week after week after week after week after week after week after week, it's the same 5 DJs that are constantly opening for all of those big artists, one after the other, because they're part of the promoter group that are getting out there and promoting the shows. And it's not necessarily because the promoter's like, hey, let's give a shot at somebody new, let's give a shot at somebody up and coming, or let's promote, you know, a local artist like Jason who's got a #1 song, or let's, you know, they're not doing that. They're saying, who's selling tickets? I'm going to put them out there. And it's funny because you see these artists in town who are, you know, who play more nationally and internationally than they do locally. And it's because of that, because it's like, you know, you look at somebody like Ben A, he never plays in Denver, but he's constantly playing nationally and internationally, because he's not about to spend his time going out hawking tickets on the street, because he's spending his time in the studio making music.
Yeah.
You know, another thing, with some exceptions, I think that it's very difficult to be taken seriously in your own hometown. It's much easier when you are coming to a new city as a stranger.
Yeah.
There's a big mystery to that. And
that's always been my mission.
Here's the interesting thing.
That's why Chris moves so much.
When you come,
Exactly.
I was becoming too local.
I gotta go nationally, man.
There you go.
Coast to coast.
When you come back, though,
It's easier for me to play in
you come
Columbia
back
than it was
as like a stranger in your
Denver.
own town. You know what I mean? Like after you've made the rounds, you're treated like you're not a local, but you're, you know, you're
the favorite local.
Yeah, but I think you come back as a little bit of
that wears off, you know.
Like when you go away and come back.
Eric would know.
The going away part gets you more attention elsewhere. And no one really. I mean, Detroit did it, but there's few locations besides Detroit, Berlin, and a few other places where you really love your locals, right? I think what's more likely is everyone wants to see a stranger, because maybe it's a mentality of, he's not going to be here long. If I don't watch him now, I got to wait another year or 6 months.
Scarcity. I mean, that's just like a human. That's a.
Here you're like, well, I could see
existential
him
motivator
next week, or I could see him neither, because I could see him next month as well. Like, I think it's tricky, because you need to play to build an audience, and yet you need to not play to keep a little bit of your mystique, and also to change up your show, right? Every time you play, you want to be able to introduce something new. So if you're playing every weekend, it's kind of difficult to reinvent yourself week after week. Even you know, even with all the songs that are available, you need to know these things. And of course, you're going to get known for certain tracks that you play for a certain amount of time, but you need to be able to evolve. And I think if you're playing every weekend, it's difficult to evolve as a local. And that,
you know, and that's one of the things that's different between DJs and bands. When you were just talking about being in bands before, one of the big things that's different is that every single DJ has access to exactly the same music, where individual bands, you have your own sound, your own talent. You know, I play guitar differently than you play guitar.
Yep.
And so you can listen to me one night and you the next night, or me headlining and you opening, or me opening and you headlining, and it's two different artists. Where I can, if I'm a promoter or a club owner, I can be like, okay, well, this kid's going to sell 100 tickets and he's going to play the same tracks as this guy over here who's not going to sell any tickets. So I'm just going to let the kid who sells tickets, I don't care if he's a good DJ or not, he's going to play the same music, but he's going to get 100 more people there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And with bands, you don't have to overcome that, because by the nature of it, your band has a sound and a personality. And, you know, you and I might both play a Strat, but it's going to sound really different when you play it and when I play it.
Yeah, there's well, being in a band is a great way to be excused from being told what to do.
That's
I mean,
true.
a club is either gonna want to play you or they're not, but they can't change your sound. They can't say, you know what, you're an original band, but you're gonna play, you know, you're gonna play Taylor Swift covers.
Right.
You know, that's not gonna work. And kind of what's cool about that as well is no one wants to fucking hear that. They want to hear you do you. That's kind of the thing. Whereas as a DJ, sometimes people don't want to hear you do you. Some people still think of DJ as like the soundtrack to their night, right? And they come because they want you to play what they want to hear, and they kind of forget the artistry behind it. Where a band, they know they can't go up to a band and make a request, right? Except for Freebird, of course. But other than that, you know, no requests. So,
That's you
can even take that. You can even take that a step farther. And I think a lot of club owners realize that ultimately, you know, I can play X track, or you can play X track, or Joe Schmo can play X track, and it's still going to be the same track, and it's still going to be just as good no matter who pushed play. And so the club owners go, well, why would I put the effort into this when I can just bring in this person just to do that for me?
Yeah, I think that's where the power of
that's
being,
programming.
well, the power of also
programs it
being
better.
your own producer. Like when you produce your own music, when you produce your own signature remixes, when you've got some exclusive stuff, that can really help with your artistry. I think
if it matters to the crowd.
Right. I mean, love him or hate him, but if you take someone like a Deadmau5 who made his own tracks, and he kind of basically came into electronic music like a band does. Like, I'm gonna play my shit. I'm gonna put on a great show. I'm gonna play my shit. I'm not even gonna use CDJs. I don't give a shit about that. I'm gonna just change the whole thing. He eventually had to be accepted as that guy, so they know what they're gonna get. But he built his name because no one else can really do his music like him, right? Because it's his. And obviously, when you have a big globe that's worth $3 or $4 million, you're not really going to be able to one up him as a local artist, right? So I don't know what point I'm making, because my point is not spending money, but my point is that you have to find a balance of becoming an artist. And that's where the Underworlds and the Orbitals and the Chemical Brothers come into this game, where I think the DJ's next step has to be somewhere in artistry, like a balance between artistry and the DJ side of things. Because I just think that the era of the DJ it doesn't really have the magic to it that it used to. It used to be a mystery where 95% of people didn't know what DJs were really doing, right? But now everyone not only knows, but they got the same equipment. They've got, you know, the mystery side isn't really there anymore. So we need to really stand apart as artists. Now, I do believe that you can be an artist who doesn't make your own music if you're really creative with the music that you play. But once again, who's going to take the risk of an artist that hasn't built a name from his own music? If you build your
And
name,
I really think that what you're saying is that it's really splitting into two different worlds. One is the really unique kind of artist DJ, whether it's a producer,
sure.
and that's what gives the artistry, or whether it's the skilled performer, whether it's a technician, whether it's an instrumentalist, whether it's a live set, whether it's whatever. That's one realm. And the other realm is the people, the kind of the ones who are making a living. And you've got the artist on one side, and you've got the worker kind of making a living on the other side. There used to be a lot of people in the middle. I think a lot of us used to be in the middle. We were, you know, we could play kind of whatever, but we played what we really liked, and we could still kind of get gigs and do that. And that's kind of, I feel like that's almost disappearing, because you've got,
I
it's
agree.
It's almost
I
like
don't know.
if you make an analogy to painting, you know, you've got artists who are making art, and maybe they make money. A very, very, very small amount of them actually make money, and the rest of them are making art. And then you get the people who paint houses, and they're painting, and they're making money, and they're making way more money than most of those artists are ever going to make painting.
Sure.
But they're not in it for the art, they're in it to make a buck.
Well,
And
what
for
about
me,
like? What
I
about
see
like?
you've got DJs on one side that are like, you know, club DJs or bar DJs or top 40 commercial DJs, and they're going to make money. They're always going to make more regular fees. They're, you know, wedding DJs are always going to make more money than your local club DJ.
Sure.
And they're not doing it for the art. They're functionaries. And then you've got the people making the art on the other side, where yes, some will make
Or
it.
people are doing, or people have the side job. They do their art, but the way they make their money is that side job, wedding DJ.
Right.
Well,
thing.
Phil
Because only a
Phil Glass was a
minuscule,
fucking.
tiny little percent will ever make money off of art.
So Phil,
A tiny piece, no matter the art.
do you know Phil? You guys all know Phil Glass, the minimalist composer.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, like responsible for a lot of influence in techno and, you know, everything really nowadays. He worked a day job until he was 40. He did like handyman repair and stuff like that until he's 40 years old. One of the most revered composers of the last 100 years was a handyman until he was 40. But then, you know,
and I guess what I'm saying is that there's a million handyman musicians that you've never heard of and will never hear of.
so no, Butch is a good example. Butch, you guys know him, the house techno guy. I think he's German. He's always said that if he's always kept the day job on top of it, and he's like, yeah, if I was to quit DJing right now, I could drop DJing and be totally fine. And if you watch like videos from inside, he does like Instagram stuff and all that sort of stuff, and you see his house and his studio, and you're like, whoa, you're doing very well for yourself. So he could just cut DJing entirely out of his life and live the same standard of life that he's doing right now, because he figured out how to, you know, do both, and, you know, how to create a stream of income that's outside of just DJing.
Yeah,
Especially,
I think the thing what we're all coming down to is how we market ourselves and our brand as an artist. You know, kind of like my branding and my marketing is different from Eric's, and it's different from Jason's and Alex. Like, it's all just different. It's just different marketing, branding, and trying to push out your vision on a consumer.
I mean, as an artist, it's a necessary evil now. It's not the days where, see, back in the day, you know, once again, going back to bands, but I think even with DJs as well, in the beginning, there was a whole department to artist development where we went,
right.
We know your first couple albums, you know, if you're in a band, we know your first couple albums are going to fail. But we believe sound, and we know that by the fourth album, we're going to make up for all that building up. You know what I mean? Where we're in the day and age where not only do you have to produce your own music and master your own, well, you might not need to master your own music, but you got to produce your own stuff. You got to have the package done. You got to have the fans. You got to have everything. And then if you get signed, they expect you to sell 1 million records or they drop you, right?
Yeah, you're like, what does a label even do anymore?
And as a DJ, I think you're expected that there's not a whole lot of development in the artist unless you get a big DJ who just loves you and says, I'm going to take you in under my wing.
Right.
And then you become kind of a protege of some other DJ, which is kind of how a good amount of DJs came into the game. But I don't think that it's an accident that these proteges become big, and a lot of people on the ground level that didn't get that, as hard as they work, they can't, there's not enough energy to get them off the ground, right? Which is why a lot of very talented people will struggle for ages. And I think there's obviously there's management agencies and this sort of thing, but here's the thing. Now it seems to be the ones that are DJs that are making it are the ones that are kind of buying into the system. So the way I see that as working is, first, they hire themselves a ghost producer. Doesn't mean they can't produce, but they can't be bothered with that because they're on this promotional thing of building their brand. So it's like, all right, so they're paying someone to drop tunes for them, and they might be someone involved or not involved, whatever. And then
they could be the A&R. They could be the A&R.
And then they're going out and they are DJing to make the money. So the ghost producer gets a percentage of that. And also, obviously, they're buying into some of the early slots that they get. They're buying into festivals. They're buying into ways that they can have their name. So now you get into a festival, then people look and they're like, oh, wow, this guy's got like 20 releases. They've got a history. Even though they don't really have a history, they've got people working that have been cranking out tunes to give them this illusion of longevity, right?
Right.
That they've got like a back catalog. So I think that a lot of things like this are happening where DJs now are investments for people who have bigger money, and those are the ones, unless you grow up in an environment where your family has enough money to where you could buy yourself into the system. Now, here's the thing, like talent or no talent, I don't know that it's a respectful way to approach your career, but it might get your foot in the door in a way that someone who's got equal or more talent can't do, because they can't they can't spend enough money to get their face in front of enough people to build momentum.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to the idea of, especially nowadays, outsourcing.
Oh, this went dark. I'm sorry, guys.
No, it's not. I don't think it's dark. I think it's actually kind of a good question because a lot of people like Stevie Aoki, for instance, is a good example. I don't know if he makes his own music. He might, in some senses, or A&R it in a lot of ways, but he's very concentrated on the marketing aspect of it, and that's a skill within itself. To be a good marketer there's a lot of creativity that goes behind it. So just because you're not necessarily a creative like artist, quote unquote, like you're a creative producer, what you are is you're a creative marketer, which means you are creative. Like if that whole idea of throwing cakes at people and stuff like that, that's a work of art in a lot of ways, because
it's a ridiculous thing. Like, look,
well, it's
it's an attention grabber.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, everyone's got their little shtick, right? I mean, Morrissey used to put flowers, daisies in his back pocket, or he wore hearing aids, for no reason, right? But it was
Gigi Allen used to jerk
strange
off
at that. But you start to different things. But with DJs, it's so is homogenized the right word, where everything is just kind of vanilla now, like all the
bacteria is taken off the top.
Well, it's just stuff. Like, how do you pick from all the thousands of choices of DJs? You might have your favorites because 2 or 3 locally, sort of thing, and you support, and 50 other people will support the DJ. But how does that really grow when there's so many other DJs that are pulling attention away, right? Because what ends up happening is that we play to our friends, and it doesn't go much further because it's very hard. Like with a band, your friends become your biggest promoters, because they're like, wow, this is a band and they're unique and they're different. There's no one that sounds like them. They're going to tell other people, right? But let's be honest, a lot of our friends don't really understand the whole artistry behind DJing. So how do they promote you to someone else?
Well, it's
Prom-
hard. It's
Well,
hard in
that's
Colorado
well,
because we're landlocked. There's no cities around us.
Well, there's that,
Right.
but the one good thing about Colorado is people actually speak to each other here. Try to do this in
Yeah.
LA. Everyone's their own little island. At least here, people are interacting. But the problem is
But we're so small.
there's such a small crowd. So how do you split up 400 or 500 people through the whole city for every artist that wants the attention of those people?
Oh yeah,
So-
especially
so-
here where you get Carl Cox and Carlo Leo playing the same weekend.
Yeah,
So-
exactly. Right.
In a city of 700,000 people, where only 1,000 that really give a shit.
Well, listen, guys, I gotta run here pretty quick.
Okay.
But this is a great conversation. I'd love to come back and do another one because
Yeah.
I'd love to get to the positive side of all of this as well. I just wanted to kind of explore this territory because, you know, people who might be watching this, like us, they're no different than us. They're trying to build themselves as artists as well. And I think you need to ask the hard questions.
I think I agree. So I put out questions to like whatever audience that I have, which is way less active ever since the pandemic began. I put it out all over the place, and I only got one question solicited, being the first one, and that was, he's like, I got tunes, but I don't got a plan to get myself out there. What are they? And we're answering that question right now, and I think it's very important, and that's, kind of why I wanted to have this thing, because at the very least, maybe someone watches this, but more importantly, you get 4 people in the same market who can bounce these ideas off of each other. And have that dialogue and really talk about the nuances of this particular market and how does this go to the next step, because Colorado is such an interesting place where Eric, when I was talking to him in this interview that Eric and I had, he was saying that we don't know how lucky we are with the amount of people that we get here, but the names that we draw are not congruent with the local scene, and I do everything I can in order to support the scene with this channel and everything, and I index all the music that I come upon. I keep a proactive mind at it. I look at it like every day, and I get to see the numbers. I would say out of everyone in Colorado, I have an idea of the numbers more than most people, I would say, because I'm consistently looking at every single label and every single group across the board and the artists that come in to, and what they post and the traction that they get on their stuff. And it's not, and even at a bare basic level, like what artists do, even in places like around the world where they get some sort of, notoriety, we're not doing that here. And I wonder if that's a result of the culture that exists here, or if it's ignorance, or if just because we're like an island state that, that we don't have the resources other places have. I'm not exactly sure. I speculate as a marketer, but I think that's why this thing is important. This exchange is
I think, honestly, our crutch isn't that we don't have the clubs, and it isn't like we don't have the venues
or the money.
Once again, I think what it is that we don't have the DIY ability that we used to have. There's really a crackdown on these small venues that are trying to come up and do something interesting. And this is where movements happen. All movements kind of start really small. And I think it's becoming more difficult for these small scenes, these small ideas to spark and grow. And when you have a DIY sort of thing, money is not really the concept. It's all artistry, and artistry really draws a certain crowd of people and real forward thinkers. And then the forward thinkers create the scene. So I don't think that just anyone can come into one of the bigger clubs and make that happen. I think it needs to start where everyone feels comfortable. And when something different is happening, you need a very accepting environment, right? And
Right.
also, let's face it, you need a smaller venue to start. So when there's only 20 people there, it doesn't seem super empty. It seems like the right size for this small spark to start. And then when it gets big enough, then you move to something a little bigger. But I think that's one of our problems is we're thinking big and we're not thinking DIY. And
We're
I don't,
so
I think
lucky
that,
in
I think
Denver
that there's
though,
a
for
real,
that.
I think there's a real
in some
reason
ways.
for that though.
Oh, go on.
I think there's a real reason for why that's been really stunted in Denver compared with a lot of other cities. And that is the cost of real estate. Anybody, doesn't matter the size of the venue. Any venue is going to pay a premium for rent in this market. Where if you're in most major cities, you know, there used to be shitty neighborhoods in Denver where you could get a crappy little place. And, you know, look at, you know, places like where there used to be DIY places in Denver that there aren't anymore now. I mean, look at Fusion Factory, for example.
Sure.
Like that's now expensive real estate. And that's why those places don't exist anymore. It's not for lack of wanting a spot. It's for lack of spots in a place like Denver. And to put a little bit of a positive spin on it, you know, coming from the food and beverage consulting side of things, I can tell you that something that's about to happen, thanks to this, you know, massive tragedy of this pandemic that we have right now, and the massive tragedy of tons and tons and tons of businesses going out of business,
And venues.
is that when this is over, there's going to be a lot of spaces that are open for people to do something new. And there's going to be a lot of desperate landlords who need to get those spaces filled that have gone out of business over this
And
time.
grants.
So
There's an
people who
opportunity.
jump on
Yeah.
for people who jump on it now, there's going to be an opportunity right after this to start this. And that opportunity is going to go away super fast because those spaces are going to backfill and all of a sudden the rents are going to go right back up again.
Are you guys familiar with the Denver Safe Creative Space Fund?
No.
So it was passed.
All right, guys, I'm going to say goodbye right now. I hate to leave in the middle of the conversation, but I really enjoyed it. Alex, Christian, Eric,
Hey,
thanks
buddy.
for the invite.
Yeah.
Take
See
care,
you
all
again
of
soon.
you. Yeah, let's do this
Yeah.
again. I'd love.
Wait. Hold on, Jason.
Yeah, what's up?
Before you go, because I wanted to tell you like probably maybe an hour or so ago,
Yeah,
talking
what's up?
about your track. Can you play it for us so we could hear it like here?
What can I do? Yeah, you mean something new?
No,
Like this.
your number one track on.
Oh, it's the whole EP that went #1. So I could share like a track from it if you want.
Yeah, that'll be good.
That'd be tight. Yeah.
Is there? Let's see if there's a chat window here.
Yeah, you can send the chat window over, and I'm gonna quickly, if you need to bounce out, send the chat window over, and I can figure out a way to stream it
Okay,
over the
hang tight
thing,
just a second,
and
all right?
you know,
Let's see.
watch this work.
Is
This
a
Facebook cuts off
Bandcamp
the whole thing.
link cool?
It should be. I'm gonna leave Eric and Chris to
Sorry about that.
talk while I figure out how to get this figured out, and then you know. You got to bounce out and everything, but Jason, I appreciate you coming on. And
Yeah, thanks so much.
I would love
Sorry
to,
for some reason.
No, you're good.
Okay.
And you know, I would love to continue it and you know keep this.
All right.
I mean, it's fun. This is good. There's a lot of good things to say.
Hell yeah.
Here. Can I do it like
Good
that?
inputs.
Absolutely. Like I think this is a good learning experience for everyone involved.
Let me go
And
back.
while you
Somewhere.
guys work out the technical
Find
issues
myself real quick
here,
and then I'll
just
share
to
it.
throw something out there really quick to what you guys were talking about before.
There's
about the
two tracks
marketing and
here.
being marketers.
Ooh,
So feel
Jason's
free.
got the really good microphone. He's
Either
winning.
one. It's definitely
He's got
not.
the good microphone that overrides
Techno.
everyone else.
Yeah, the compression microphone is like and sidechain. Fuck y'all.
Yeah. He cuts in. What?
Here you go. Feel free to hate all you want or love it all you want.
Oh, we're all techno people. We hate everything.
Exactly.
We're techno people. We hate everything. So
Do you have the link?
I do have the link. Yeah.
Perfect.
You
Yeah,
got
feel free to do whatever. I think there's 2 tracks that you can stream on there out of 6. So
that. Okay, cool.
any of you guys individually, if you like it, just let me know. I'll send you more stuff.
All right.
Cool.
Awesome, man. Well, enjoy
Thanks.
your night, buddy.
Congrats again.
Appreciate your time, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, let's do it soon enough. I mean, this is new, so you can get
Cheers.
on next week's or whatever, or next
All right.
whenever's. You know, I
Cheers.
figure this isn't live, so I can put them out whenever I want and market them, and you know, all that sort of fun stuff. So yeah,
Nice.
Sweetness. Thanks,
Yeah.
guys. Take care.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jason.
Jason.
Yeah, buddy. Have a good night.
Okay, and then there were three.
And then we reshuffle.
Yeah, so you know, here's a good subject. While I don't listen to you guys, how do you guys know each other?
Well, I know Eric from Miami during Winter Music Conference, and I known him from a good friend of mine, Victor Mercer. He goes by Vic M, and he kind of introduced me to Eric when we came up on a gig at Fat Tuesdays on South Beach. So that's how I met Eric, and then ever since then, we like
Yeah,
talk
we
to
played
each other
together.
almost
We
every
played
day.
together a couple of years in Miami when Chris was still living in Miami.
Yeah.
And then by chance, Chris moved to Denver. But I mean, we knew each other from Miami long before Denver.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that when I was talking last time, and I was like, huh? Because you didn't live in Miami, Chris? Did you? Not Chris.
Yeah.
I mean Eric.
I did not. No,
No.
Chris lived in Miami, so he was really connected with the clubs and the events down there. So when I would go down to play for Winter Music Conference, which I did for years, we would cross paths and got introduced to each other, and then ended up playing similar shows and helping each other get shows. And so yeah, we've known each other from that.
Oh, okay, right on. That's cool. All right,
Yeah.
I think I have this figured out. This is where we get our. We figure out Facebook's going to mute a track that the guy owns the rights to, who gave us permission for, and because that's their thing.
Yeah, speaking about
So you can
that
play
earlier,
Jason's new Witch House track.
Yeah, exactly. So this is and you should be share screen. Let's see if is that playing? Can you hear that? No.
I cannot hear it.
All right. So this is a beautiful thing
I
about
can
the
see
first
it.
time we do this. You can see it. Damn, I thought I was so clever. Jason, this is good. This gives us a chance to actually figure out how to do this, because it'd be cool to be able to do music.
what if it goes into your preference?
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. I had the window open, and then I realized you are screen sharing. You are nope. You see a red box at the top of your meeting screen. The words you're sharing computer sound or stops here. Yeah,
Well,
I don't know. Fuck it. You know what? I'll post a link. I don't want to waste any more time with this.
Cool.
So,
I mean, I'll probably check it out after this. So
okay, cool. Stop share.
pretty sure everybody else.
That's cool.
can pick up the link.
It's really cool. You can hear a lot of his 80s influences in it. It's cool.
Oh, you've heard
It's
it.
fun.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to. I definitely want to give that a listen at some point. And I like the idea of artists who are just making music. I watched this thing the other day, and this guy was talking about why Ed Sheeran, of all people, is such a huge musical success. And I was really curious about that. And he was talking about how Ed Sheeran corners markets and all this sort of thing. And what he said that I found really interesting is that Eric Sheeran just kind of makes music. He's known for like his wedding song sort of sounding, just like croony, lover boy sort of stuff. But then he'll go and he'll do a track with like, Lil Pump or some huge #1 like trap artist or something like that, and make a club banger. And you're like, where's the translation between, soft, guitar music where you just bring an acoustic guitar and play Wembley Stadium, and that's about as minimal as you can get, and now you're making club bangers. And I think the point that got taken away from that, at least for me, was that artists, even under their brand, if they want to actually be huge, need to reach out into as many markets as possible. And they need to, and these artists who are, known for their techno might want to bring in auxiliary markets such as industrial or new wave or something like that. And it might be a good idea, as Ed Sheeran, the most streamed, most popular artist, billionaire in the world, who's not even really that old, is that he does all this under Ed Sheeran. It's not like he has a trap trap moniker or anything like that. And you get the conventional wisdom from DJs is, oh, well, if you're going to, you make acid techno, if you decide to make house music, maybe you should do that under another name. When if you look at artists who have like a lot of success, I think Radiohead's another good example. They do all their music under Radiohead. The same people who put out Fake Plastic Trees are putting out something like Spinning Plates. It's all Radiohead, and those don't sound anything the same. And Ed Sheeran puts out soft little, guitar, like acoustic rock. Not if you call it rock, it's like pop folk, but he's also on like grimy club bangers as Ed Sheeran.
Yeah, I think that it comes down to, and this was something I was going to actually mention before when Jason was on here, is that I think that we get sometimes too kind of monolithic, saying, okay, to be successful or to get big or whatever. And it's like, I think that, to go to the question that the person put in for this, when you put out for questions, they said, okay, I've got tunes, but I don't have a plan. What I would say to that person is, I would say, well, where do you want to end up? And then you come up with a plan for how to get there, because there isn't just one path. And we can use all kinds of examples of different people, like, oh, well, this guy does this. Okay, yeah, but this one does this. And it's something totally different, and they're successful. Or, you could say, okay, Ed Sheeran uses his same name to do all the different sorts of music, but then you can say, there's people in the electronic scene, like, Richie Houghton has multiple personalities, multiple aliases. You've got people like Maceo Plex, who has multiple aliases. You have artists that one of the most prolific artists in electronic music in the world is Steve Angelo. And you don't know 90% of what he puts out, because he doesn't advertise that this is my other alias for this and this is my other alias for this. He puts out minimal techno music, and he puts out deep house music, and he puts out ambient music. But yeah, he also puts out EDM as part of Swedish House Mafia. But one might get commercially successful, but that doesn't mean that you don't know all of the other things that they're doing as well. And I think that's why I would ask that person, what's the end goal? Do you want to be a superstar? Okay, cool. That's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you want to do that, here's what you do. And that's kind of what Jason was talking about. Okay, you buy into the system, you play into the PR and the marketing, and you use these things as tools, as an ends to a means, or as a means to an end. If your end goal is, I want to be an artist and I want to get music out there to the world, well, that gauge of success is very different, and the path on how to get there is very different too. And I would say, I was talking with Josh Allison, who's the label owner of Journey Deep Black, that I just put my latest track out on. And we were talking about
second latest track. Come on, give Chinitos and Prince some
well, latest track before today.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, we were talking about how what you use different things for in your music. Why do you put music out? And why do you put it out on certain channels? And why do you release it as an EP or as a single? And why do you do those things? And they're all they're strategic steps that you take. You can, if you just want to just put out music just to say I have music out, okay, cool, put it out music. Throw your songs up on Bandcamp and you'd be done with it, and never sell one, have people listen to them kinda, and that's it. Okay, great. Well, then that's maybe success for you, because you wanted to put music out there and you wanted to make music, and that's your art. Awesome. Do that. For other people, you know, I would say for me, I really enjoy the process of making music and putting out music, but my favorite thing in this industry is DJing. I love to play shows. I love the energy of playing shows. I love being in front of a crowd. I love the fun of using music to manipulate a crowd and to get different emotional reactions out of it. That's what I personally love. So for me, a lot of producing music is to help market to do DJ shows.
Mm-hmm.
There's other people that it's the opposite. Like they hate to DJ, but they have to in order to support the music that they put out.
Mm-hmm. One is content for the other, if you're looking at it from a marketing perspective. Where
What's that?
One thing is content for the other. One thing is essentially that
Right.
that offer that offer you're putting up in order to entice people to get to the next offer. That's your main money pot or self-actualization pot or whatever you want to
Right.
call
And
it.
that's and for each path is different. For
Mhm.
some people, they want, you know, their big thing is I want to have my music played by the biggest artists in the world. I want to have it recognized. I want to get played on the radio. I want to chart really high on a chart. And that's one side of it. And for them, it has nothing to do with DJing. And then there's other people who it's the exact opposite. It's like, okay, well, I don't want to make music. I don't like to make music. So I'm going to, hire a ghost producer to make music, because for me, what I'm in it for is I want to DJ. I want to be out there. And then you've got people that are in the middle, and you've got people that want to do different things in a different way. And for each one of those people, there's a different gauge of success.
Mhm.
So it's like, is success a slamming club night packed full of people that came to see you? Or is success a chart topping production that you did that's an original? Or is success money? Or is success fame? Or is it traveling and playing big clubs? Or everybody's definition is a little different. And I think that you have to start with the end in mind and say, okay, well, here's where I want to end up. So here's how here's the plan to get there.
I think
a plan.
No. It really depends on your direction. It's all different depending on what your end goal is, as you said. One thing that I think is interesting, this whole thing reminded me of this talk that I saw at CU Boulder, of all places, where are you guys familiar with the band called The Acid, by any chance?
No, I can't recall.
So you might be familiar with the people who are in The Acid. You know who Adam Freeland is?
Yeah, I know that name.
Yeah, Adam Freeland. He's a big like breaks producer / house.
Mm-hmm.
He ran I forget the name of the label off the top of my head. I was really into him, but he had acts like a lot of like early 2005 2007 like electro house people were on it. Evil Nine and people like that. Alex, what the heck's his name? I forget, but a bunch of like really big like electro house people, essentially, and had like this sort of like punk rock sort of edge. It was really fresh at the time, and so that guy's in it. And then, are you guys familiar with Howling? Frank Weiderman from Ame or whatever it is, does it, and he's in it with this guy named Rye, and Rye's in The Acid. And then the other member is Steve Nalipa, who is like one of the first Ableton certified coaches ever. He teaches at Chapman University, and the people who've come out of his class are all like huge artists nowadays. They're like like people like Mr. Carmack, you probably see around and stuff like that, the big trap artists. G. Jones, Blue Tech, all these people. Like, he's the guy who taught all of them through university in this class. But what's interesting about this group is they didn't, in any of their PR material or anything they put out to blogs and to get press and get to where they were, they never mentioned who they were. And I remember him saying that. He's like, what was interesting about our music is we never mentioned who we were, and we just stood on the product that we put out. and we got press. So there's something to be said about if you make good music and you decide to send it out to enough blogs or enough channels like Spotify playlists or YouTube places, and you make a big list and you go down through it and you email all those people and you follow up with it. If you have quality shit, you will blow up, because they did. They got a lot of stuff just based on the quality of what they put out. And they didn't mention this is a collaboration between Rye, Adam Freeland, and Stephen Alepa. They went and they said they just put out their music.
Yeah, and I
They
think
got
that
huge.
a lot of that depends, again, and kind of coming back to what I was mentioning before, a lot of that depends on who's the audience, who's the end consumer.
Well, they're
And
pop music. They make
But that's
pop
what, I guess
music.
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is
Pop
for that,
electronica, pop weird
that type
avant-garde
of
shit.
music,
But
for that type of music, your consumer is on Spotify.
Mhm.
You know, for people who are making underground techno and house music, your consumer is DJs who are performing. And so they're not just listening to a track streaming on Spotify, they're downloading a track to use in a set, whether it's through a promo or whether they're buying it or whatever. So it's a totally different crowd. And so then you have this secondary crowd of people that are hearing your music because they're going to see a different artist. And so you're kind of, you're selling to a second generation crowd rather than direct to consumer. And that's why for, you know, techno and house music, being on platforms like, you know, Apple Music and Spotify and, you know, even Bandcamp, that's not where your consumer is. Your consumer is club DJ and who's playing in a very specific type of club to a very specific crowd. And that crowd's not necessarily coming to hear your song. They're coming to hear what that DJ is going to play. So you've got to get your music to that crowd through somebody else. And so it's a really different kind of marketing path, depending on the genre of music and who the end listener is and who the end consumer is, who's going to actually pay the money to buy the track or see it performed.
What about artists who kind of do both? So there's artists, God, I need to think of an example right now off the top of my head who's like a big artist. Bicep, I think, is a good example where they make club music in a lot of cases. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they make more songy stuff, but it's a little more experimental. But you go to I'm going to look at their Spotify right now, and you go to, and their top track has 43 million plays. Yet they make club music, arguably. Like what do you think they do that allows them to get away with both? Because ultimately their consumers is a small little, you know, club subset, but meanwhile they make kind of avant-garde deep house music and they have 43 million streams on their top track.
I think there was somebody like that. I think a lot of it has to do with hitting a trend when it's a trend. Because if you look, there's moments when, you know, very recently, you know, deep house, tech house, tropical house, whatever, has become a really, really commercial music. And that's become what, you know, kids that are my kids' age are listening to and streaming while they are driving in their car and streaming while they're, you know, at the gym or when they're at the beach with their friends or whatever. It's become the soundtrack to what they're doing.
Oh, really? Gen Z's all in the tropical house? Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, if you hit that trend, you know, I'll give you an example. Well, I think there's a lot of examples of this, but all popular music, no matter what it's ever been at any point in the history of popular music, started out as an underground type of music and then got popular. And so the people who hit at those moments are the people who hit at the moment when something was popular, and not necessarily because, you know, they were better than another artist that was out. It's just they were making the right music at the right time when a trend hit. And they were part of that trend and they were able to ride the wave of that trend. And I think that there's a lot of artists in a lot of genres that are like that. Then there's artists that specifically on purpose latch on to those trends and say, okay, this is really a thing. So now I'm going in that direction because my end goal is I want to sell millions of records. So I'm going to latch on to what this trend is, even though it's not necessarily what I was doing previously, you know, and trying to get crossover success into other styles of music, because that's what's popular at the moment, to kind of help them expand what they're doing. And
Scream.
that's a much harder thing to do in certain genres. You know, because it never really gets popular.
There's also like labels and agencies that push out for that kind of stuff too.
Also,
yeah, but I still don't think those agencies and labels are going out on a limb. They're saying, okay, here's what's popular. Let's gather up a bunch of people that can do that so that we can make some money. Because ultimately, they're in it for money. You know, they're not. There's very few labels that are, you know, specifically big labels that are in it for the art. You know, they're
right. Yeah, that's
money.
right.
well, what about Warp back in the day? You know, a good example would be Aphex Twin. He might have been riding a wave, but he made it on MTV America when that was not the style of music that was happening at that point.
And that's the thing, is those,
and he had Warp.
There's
Warp
people that break the mold for sure.
Yeah. You know, and things like Warp Records, for instance, they were big in the UK and they broke a lot of artists and, you know, all that sort of stuff. But they had people even like Kenny Larkin was on Warp and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that wasn't a big artist at the time. And they just really managed
Well,
to
but
break
Kenny
people's
Larkin
souls.
was a big artist in Europe at the time.
I guess that's true. But Warp
You know,
is
just like Jeff Mills was huge in
Mhm.
Europe at the time, just like Richie
but
Hawtin
Warp's
was
an
huge in
English
Europe at the
record
time.
label. So,
Yeah.
you know.
But that's what I'm saying. Those guys were big over there, and so they were being picked up on a big label in a different place that was big. You know, and yeah, it did come back this direction, but a lot of those guys started off as underground artists here, and then when that music took off there, even though it wasn't taking off here, they were big artists in their own right. I mean, they were playing, you know, in the early 90s, people like, you know, Richie Hawtin and John Aquaviva and things like that, they're playing sold out shows in Europe, and then they come back to the States and people are like, who's this person? So there was a certain amount of crossover with those guys as well. But, you know, there's artists that do it on purpose too, that intentionally, you know, and that might be a little bit of the Ed Sheeran thing. Like, he may not be super into making club bangers, but he might be like, you know what, this is a way for me to open up to another market. It might go in that direction too. But for me, the biggest one of those who I think actually, you know, he gets a bad rap sometimes, but he drove a lot of the trends to things that blew up into a multi-billion-dollar industry, is David Guetta.
Oh yeah.
And he was, you know, the king of the gay underground house scene in France in the 90s.
Yeah,
And
he made like house music back then. Yeah.
No, I mean, he was one of the, you know, when Filter House was the thing, he was a god at that. He had the most popular radio show in France. He was the #1 DJ in clubs in France at that time, but this was kind of an underground scene. House music, you know, and particularly the gay club scene for house music, was a really underground scene, and David Guetta was the king of that. And then he came up with this idea of, I'm going to make this, you know, I'm going to break myself bigger by, I'm going to start to approach these big R&B artists and say, hey, I'm going to write a track and I want you to sing on it, and we're going to sell it to my crowd and we're going to sell it to your crowd. And then he starts breaking these big tracks, like
Black Eyed Peas, right? Was that the one that he did it with?
What's that?
It was Black Eyed Peas that was like his one that really.
Well, actually, even before that, he
yeah,
did
before that, because he had some female vocal ones
Roland,
too.
what's her name?
Kelly Rowland.
Kelly Rowland. His song "When Love Takes Over" with her was massive, and it was a huge club hit, and it became a huge radio hit because she was big enough and he was big enough. And then he started to latch on to artists like Sia and Black Eyed Peas and things like that, where each one of them was profiting from the other's crowd to blow it up into something that became EDM. I mean, it became something way bigger than any of them. And David Guetta gets this rap of being this guy who just kind of showed up and, you know, played one note and made millions of dollars. And he had a 20-year-long, 30-year-long career before anybody in the world knew who he was outside of France.
Yeah, I've always respected him.
And he was brilliant enough to say, this can be big if I bring these R&B artists into the house scene, and I bring house into the R&B scene, and they created something that was bigger than the sum of the parts.
They really did, and I think
it was intentional. It was very intentional.
it's so smart in a lot of ways. And you know, he gets a lot of people like rip on David Guetta for being, you know, ghost producer and all that sort of stuff. And as you said, he was doing it for 20 years beforehand. And when you get to a point where you're managing
Absolutely.
a brand that big, and you know, you're spending all your time on that sort of stuff with PR and, you know, marketing and even finance and dealing with your people and stuff like that, you just don't have time to make music anymore. And maybe he thought,
I mean, just his
you know,
club night brand in Ibiza, his Fuck Me I'm Famous
Hold
night
on,
that
I'll
he
be
was
back.
doing in Ibiza forever. Like, that was one of the biggest nights on the island every single week, every single summer. It blew up to the point where he had multiple merchandise boutiques around the island of different places of people buying the t-shirts of the events of the night. And all of that came out of what he was doing with crossover success with music.
Yeah.
You know, he was able to parlay that into something just massive.
Yeah, no, it's, and he I think he just like reprioritized at a certain point where, you know, he'd done DJing for such a long time and he knew how to make these great, you know, filter house tracks, and he had his, you know, reputation and whatnot, and he just went on and did something else. And it's just, I don't know if that's actually the case, but you know, I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that in a lot of ways.
I don't think so either. And I think a lot of the people
give him a lot of shit unnecessarily.
No, I agree. And I think a lot of the people that were the original kind of first wave of crossover house EDM and making that into a commercial thing, almost all of them came from these long careers of doing other stuff. I mean, you know, we talked a minute ago about Steve Angelo, but every member of the Swedish House Mafia had a huge career long before they were ever a thing. And then they were smart enough to develop that into a brand that then went to be a global brand. But it wasn't like they were some flash in the pan that just showed up and all of a sudden were playing stadiums. Like, these guys have been doing this. You know, Axwell was producing music on some of the very first digital computer systems. He was one of the very first artists making computer-based digital music.
Really?
Back when you had to actually write code to make tracks.
Yeah, and they had a lot of good tracks before they became a group too.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I think a lot of these guys, people see them once they're famous and they go, oh yeah, well they just blew up out of nowhere. They're nobody. They have no talent. And all these people that are struggling are the ones who really have talent. And it's like, you know what? These guys struggled for decades, and then they were lucky enough to make it big, just like in any art, you know?
You never know what happens until you see it, and it just all kind of seems all of a sudden in a lot of cases. And certainly there are young prodigies who just blow up right away, for sure, and they get, you know, incredibly lucky, like people like Nicholas Jar or something like that, or Disclosure, where they're like 18 years old and they're on the top of the world.
Yeah.
You know, but in a lot of cases, that's because their music speaks. Like their stuff is just that good. You know, I'm not gonna. You know, people talk shit about Disclosure, but they're amazing producers, especially for their age. You know, they knew how to write a hook.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, in the EDM world, the one I always think about is Martin Garrix, because he blew up at such a young age that people are like, oh, this must be like some boy band thing where they just found him, ghost produced a bunch of tracks and whatever. And all of his original tracks were projects that he wrote while he was going to music production school.
Yeah.
And he was a computer nerd, music production nerd, and then just happened to have some songs that people go, wow, that was amazing. And they got heard by the right people, you know, and all of a sudden people like Tiesto go, wow, this kid's got some talent. So let's, you know, talent combined with, you know, a 17-year-old, this could be a marketable thing. And so then they put him out there, but it wasn't just like, oh, let's find some, you know, boy band, you know,
Milli Vanilli.
Yeah, exactly.
Crisscross.
And we're just going to put them out there. You know, he actually was making good music for that genre. And they said, oh, wow, this is cool. He's doing this and he's a kid. You know, let's make this into something.
Yeah. I mean, it just, there's a lot of stories like that happening. And I think that's pretty amazing that we're living in a time when that can happen. And then they find out they're 17 after the fact. You know, if you're proactive, you can get, you know, and you have the right song for the right channel nowadays. You email these, you know, YouTube channels or wherever, or you figure out how to get on a Spotify playlist. And nowadays you can actually submit your songs to official Spotify playlists. If you go in and release your track, they say 7 days, but really, like, everyone recommends about 4 weeks. If on your distribution channel you get it, you know, actually up on Spotify and notify Spotify with the, you know, pitch and everything, you can get your stuff there if it holds up. So we're living in a pretty interesting time, and I think people just don't know the resources that we're so lucky to have.
And it's not just in electronic music either. It's
in all genres. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and DJs and producers in electronic music tend to like talk really cynically about it and whatever, but it's everywhere. It's the, you know, the ability to produce an album in your bedroom is something that has gone cross genre now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that, you know, I mean, look at artists like Billie Eilish. There's not many bigger artists in the world right now, and she made her whole first album with her brother in their house.
It's actually really good. I don't know if you guys are Billie Eilish fans, but this guy is like, holy shit!
No, I am too.
What a good album!
I have to say, especially that the theme song she did for the new James Bond movie.
Oh yeah,
I gotta say, she absolutely nailed that, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, this kid's got talent. And that's the thing is, it used to be, if you had talent, but you didn't have any, you know, you didn't get discovered, your talent just withered up and died. You just, you know, you made music in your bedroom and that was it. Now somebody can have talent and make music in their bedroom and become a multi-Grammy winning, you know, international superstar. And, you know, you see that with people like Billie Eilish. You see it with, you know, artists like Skrillex, who did his whole first album on his laptop in headphones without even monitor speaker. You know, like these guys, they've made it so that anybody with talent can showcase their talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I
they
think
just
a lot
got to
of
do the
times
legwork.
it's misinterpreted as anybody can be a musician, and it's not that. It's actually even harder now because anybody can get their music out there. So there's even more crap to weed through to find the good stuff.
That's true.
There can't be, there's no truer words in that case. And, you know, one thing that I always, and one thing I'm going to try to do my damnedest to do, it kind of is hard as a journalist to do this at the same time, but is to give people the tools that are necessary in order to be their own publicist, because it's really necessary. And it's really easy nowadays too. You basically just gotta, you know, get high, put on some music, maybe drink a beer, and then you just look up a song that you like that's similar to the music that you're into. You find out what YouTube channel that's on, all right? And then you just go to the About section of that YouTube page. If they have an email address on that, you take it and you put it into a spreadsheet, all right? And you just go down the list. And some places don't have emails, but I would say 40% of YouTube channels that you want to be on has an email address you get in touch with. So you get that email address, you put it in a spreadsheet, you figure out the name of the channel, you figure out what it's similar to, and then what you can do is really easy. You just go and you put it into an email and you say, hey, I saw that you posted insert variable that you found, like this artist, you know, I saw that you posted Bicep, all right, and that you have posted some other smaller artists as well. I just released this track. Would you be interested in putting it out? And you put that in a spreadsheet, and you can actually have all those variables with something that's called a mail merger, just fill in those variables automatically. And then it goes out to that whole email list at once. And then you want to follow up again. You can either buy software that does it automatically for like $15 a month, or what you can do is just, you know, 4 or 5 days later or something like that, you go and you just reply and you say, hey, just following up. You do the exact same thing, and you do that 5 times, and good chance you have a list of 100 of them. If you have a good track, you'll get on at least a few of them, and next thing you know, you have 20,000 plays, 30,000 plays, and that's enough to go and show people, like, look, I'm a big deal, you should book me.
And I think that you just hit the nail on the head where you said, if you have a good track, and then you said all these things that you do. And I think that what too many people don't do is they don't have one of those things.
Mhm.
They either have a shitty track and they try really hard to get it out there and it doesn't go anywhere.
Or it
Or
could. There's
they
plenty of
have a
shitty
great
tracks that are
track.
huge.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or they have a great track and then they don't know where to do it or know where to get it out or how to get it out, or, you know, don't have any kind of plan or don't put in the work to get it out there. So it doesn't go anywhere either. And if you put the two together, if you have good music and you put it out with a real strategic plan with a way to do it, it'll go somewhere.
Absolutely.
Maybe not the first one or the second one or the 10th one, but eventually it'll go somewhere.
It will. You just got to put in it's not even like, we're so lucky we live in a day with automation where it's really not that hard.
Yeah.
You know, there's more noise that you got to cut through for sure, because they're getting all these pitches theoretically. Not all of them are, but a lot of them are. But if you have something that's good, they will listen and they will notice. And next thing you know, you get up on this channel. Like, for instance, you guys are probably familiar with Hate, the channel Hate. Everyone's familiar with Hate at this point if they're into techno. It's not that hard to get a track on Hate at all. I have a track on Hate, all right? And people will be like, oh, that's really cool. I'm like, no, it really wasn't. It cost me 2 follow-up emails and an $8 donation is what it cost me to get a track up on Hate. So,
Right.
And what I put out, and I would say to this day, I probably have the only non-techno track on Hate. It's not techno. It's like, it's dark and dystopian, but it's certainly not techno. It's probably closer to like Afro house, really. So, you know, and it's really just a matter of following up. And if someone likes a track, they'll post it. And some of them might ask for a minimal amount of money at the end of the day. But, you know, you could take the other advertising route, and you could go and you can spend Facebook ads, and you'll pay $1 a play at least, versus you'll pay $8 for my track. It was actually on Hate Lab. It was on Hate. It would have been on Hate if I released it on vinyl. Hate main channel only does it, but they have a digital channel that has like, you know, a third of the following that Hate does. And that was $8. And
Yeah.
And
I'm actually working on right now trying to figure out how all of that same stuff works right now for YouTube.
yeah,
It's so funny because it's like starting into a whole different world, but that's really, really similar. But
it's algorithmic.
But it's different. It's just different people and different algorithms and different, you know, ways that you have to, you know, play the system to make things work. But yeah, it's funny. It's, you forget how hard it is to kind of put in the work at the start when you've got nobody paying attention to anything that you do. And it's cracking me up. It's like I'm 2 weeks into this and it's like 19 subscribers.
Yeah, it feels good. You know,
Yeah.
I watch a lot. I've been really interested in YouTube algorithms over the break, and just how that works. And, you know, you hear these people, they're like, how did I end up getting, like, music marketing people will be like, how did I end up getting this many subscribers? And really when it comes, they all say this, it's like, yeah, I made 100 videos before anyone even noticed anything.
They say the secret to YouTube videos is you got to have a face in your cover.
Oh, yeah. People pay attention to faces for sure. I will agree. There's a piece of research about this, and I have it linked somewhere, but people are drawn to faces, and advertisements with faces have higher click-through rates than advertisements that don't have faces.
Take a look at my thumbnails on my YouTube channel.
Faces. Faces are good. Yeah, I mean, people see faces everywhere. We're programmed to see them from like a survival sort of instinct. Like, I bet if you have an angry-looking face as your profile picture, people are going to see that. They're like, oh, why is that guy so pissed off? You know, if you have the right
they'll
keywords.
still click in, though.
Oh, yeah, if they have the right keywords.
Yeah, they want to know why you're pissed off.
Yeah, if you're punk rock, that fits the brand. You don't want to see a smiling Henry Rollins.
No.
Like, why?
Yeah, no, it's pretty funny. But I'm excited. It's been fun getting that started.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting into it for sure. I think we've been here for 3 hours. Speaking of the YouTube algorithm, this is going to do very well on YouTube, allegedly, from the algorithmic standpoint, if we get people to watch it. But you know, I'll put the keywords in, and you know, all that sort of stuff and tag it,
All that jazz.
all that fun stuff, because it's content. And I think one thing that needs to be said for anyone who's curious about the marketing point of view is just keep on posting shit. Not even music. Like it could be anything. Something that's tangentially similar. Like I post on my page, I post up a lot of ads, like old vintage synthesizer ads. That's something that I put up, and that gets engagement. And you put up enough of those. And one thing that's interesting is you never know who will be listening. So on my Facebook page, I put up a video of Vangelis playing the CS80, and I was like, oh man, only if I had $40,000 and a stroke of good luck to get one of these synthesizers, because there's only like 1,000 of them whoever made, but all I have is a Courier plugin at the moment. I guess that's just gonna have to do. I put up this video, and then this guy comments on it, and he says, well, I have both of them, and I gotta say the Courier one is way more. If you get a Poly Aftertouch MIDI keyboard, it'll do the same thing as the CS80, and it's very accurate. And I'm like, that's interesting. Guy has a CS80. And then I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And I click on his profile, and it's fucking Pete Townshend. And Pete Townshend, and he saw my fucking YouTube, my Instagram post. So you never ever know who sees your stuff. And I'm like, wow, that's one of the most important musicians of the last 50 years and
ever.
I guess that's the power of social media. You never know where you're gonna land or capture.
Yeah, and it's just.
And I think, like you said, you can strategically make it work to your advantage, and anyone can, but it doesn't just happen for anyone. Like you actually have to have a plan, and you have to focus and make those things happen. They don't just kind of happen because anybody can do it now. On the contrary, because anyone can do it, it's harder to cut through.
If anything, you should be putting it. I think a good rule of thumb is you should be spending at least half the amount of time you spent on the track promoting that track. So if you put 2 months into that track, you should be putting in a month in order to put that out. If you put in, depending on the quality, it's obviously not this black and white, but let's say you only put in 2 days on a track and you want to put it out. Well, maybe it's only worth 2 days of your promotion, 1 day of promotion for you,
True.
Because it doesn't have that much time. But if you put 2 months of your life into it and you work on it like 8-9 hours a week or something like that, and maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's a year. Like I still have tracks that are 3 or 2 years old that I want to do something with at some point, and they're just not quite there yet. But I know
and I think it's really important to focus too. That's like the thing. Like just working hard isn't enough. Like you got to work hard with a purpose, in a direction. Like for example, like you said, it's all about marketing, and these things are all depending on what the end result is. It's about marketing to that end result. So if your end result is to increase your plays on Spotify, put all your effort into getting people to go listen to the track on Spotify. If your end goal is that you want to chart on Beatport, put all your effort into getting everybody who's interested in that chart or in that track funneled into Beatport. If you want to be, I don't know, if you want to be on Bandcamp and you want to be a number one on Bandcamp like what Jason is, don't even tell people they can get the album anywhere else. Focus everybody to Bandcamp and get them going in that direction, and then your efforts are a lot more. They pay off a lot more if they're focused on one thing.
I would say so. And nowadays, what's interesting is we're living in a very outsourced society. So let's say you do have a full-time job and you have a little bit of play money in a lot of ways. You could go and you can hire someone in, the Philippines for $3, $4, $5 an hour or something like that. And they can spend 2 hours a day doing that other part of the market that you don't want to do necessarily. So let's say you only have time to do YouTube, but you also want Spotify, or you also want physical sales copies or whatever, or you want press, you could always train someone to do that, or there's people who just know how to do it. And especially if you're making a more like genre specific sort of sound, there's people who already have those channels to do it. I've always had a problem with that because the music I make is all over the fucking place. And you know, I don't want to be like, oh, I invented it, but I haven't heard music that sounds like mine. I swear to God. And you know, and I can't figure out necessarily those channels. So I will think of auxiliary channels that have to do with it. I think of auxiliary markets that have to do with it. But then I will also have to be like, well, I need to find someone who understands these markets already, who might be able to convince them that that's, you know, what they need or something like that. And that could be done
Right.
with you know, globalization, for lack of a better term.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, you guys want to keep on going, or what do you want to do?
I'm good with whatever.
Yeah, I really got nothing to do.
We're all locked in.
Yeah, I could keep going too. I feel like I need a little more wine here.
Or if you want, we can cut it off and like put some ideas in for the next time and do another one. I mean, we don't necessarily have to wait a week or two to do another one. We could do another one in a couple of days, and then you can put them out whenever you want.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
that's true.
I'm totally down to just keep on doing them. Like, you know, Joe Rogan style. He just puts shit out, and since
Right.
they're not live, you know, it could always be like, well, that one kind of sucked. You don't need to put that one out or whatever, you know. So yeah, I'm down to do another one in a couple days if everyone can't make it. Any ideas of maybe some other people to bring on too?
I think if there's specific things that we want to talk about, specific topics, there might be specific people that would be more interested or interesting in those conversations. You know, there's going to be people like us that have a whole bunch of kind of diverse experience and backgrounds and stuff. But if it's something that's more specific to you know, a particular area, you know, if it's about, I don't know, like we were originally going to talk about label ownership tonight. We all own labels. We all have released music on multiple labels and stuff. If it's that conversation, there's certain people who don't have labels, so they wouldn't be interesting, and then there's others who do, so they might be more interesting for the conversation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I would need to think about what the next thing is, but
I think I'd be
as
interested
it is.
in listening to like club owners and promoters
Me too.
and party goers all in one thing with producers and DJs.
Yeah, it's just a matter of like, even in this even with 3, it's a little more manageable, but with 4, you start to realize how hard it is to like actually get like a, you know, more a democratic amount of time with everybody. So,
Right.
you know, I think it should be kept to 4, 5 at the most. And
20.
yeah, 20 would just be horrifying, and I want nothing to do with that, honestly. You just get a bunch of people with awesome condenser microphones who are just able to drown out everyone else because, you know, they're out teching everybody. Just, you know, who knows? But I would like to get, you know, especially nowadays, talking with you know, we didn't talk about coronavirus at all. Go us.
Right.
Which is pretty cool. But, you know, especially nowadays with promoters, DJs have an avenue still, and producers especially still have an avenue to get their stuff out there and do everything. But promoters only exist when there's a space to hold them. So, you know, what's their role now? Is there a role still to support the artist? Are they going to switch into a role of, you know, A&R, or are they going to switch into a role of, you know, like publicists? Like, what's their next step? And I think that's a good conversation to
Well,
be had
I
as well.
think it's just gonna weed out the people like that are actually in it and just in it just to take up space.
And to get their dick
know.
sucked.
Right. Or, you know, have a girl dance next to them, or I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah,
their
I mean, I think
vices or
I think
approaches.
coronavirus is going to do that to every industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just going to thin out the people that aren't in it for the right reasons and doing it the right way and all that stuff. They're just going to weed them out.
Yeah.
They're going to go bankrupt or something. And I think there's a lot of to be said about what you were saying, Eric, about how there's going to be all these real estate opportunities coming up, because I'm not in Colorado right now. To maybe if there's a surprise there, Eric knows this, but you probably don't, Chris. I'm not in Colorado at the moment. I'm actually back in New York, where I'm from, for this duration. But I look at rent back in Denver, and it is cheaper right now. It is probably, not a lot, maybe 5 to 10%. But when you talk about 5 to 10% of, $1,000, that's pretty significant. So,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and the thing is that there's going to be a lot of empty real estate that are, bars and clubs and things like that, that it's just going to be an opportunity for people to jump in there who've always wanted to. And like what we were saying with Jason before, if there's people that are into doing the DIY thing, there's going to be a little window of time where there's going to be opportunities for them that they're going to have to jump on.
mm-hmm.
And if they don't, those are going to go away and they're going to be rented out by, a high dollar, restaurant or whatever.
Yeah, once restaurants are able to come back. But right now, especially with I was mentioning briefly before, and I think it should be mentioned again, it's called the Denver Safe Creative Spaces Fund, and Ron Astaropoulos, I think 1010 workshop, they both went under this, and it's actually a fund that gets buildings up to code for DIY. So let's say you have like a warehouse or something like that doesn't have the proper exit signs and ventilation and all that sort of stuff. Well, the city has a fund for that now, because they recognize the importance of this. And I remember when I first started writing for Westward, I wanted to have this sort of conversation about, not the live spaces thing, but like, oh, things are shutting down, things are fucked and all that sort of stuff. And my editor was like, look, they're not. And he explained all this sort of stuff. He's like, Denver has one of the most progressive policies in the country towards this sort of thing. They saw the Oakland fire and they didn't think, well, first they shut everything down because of code, but then enough people went, and, the DIY, the strong DIY presence in Denver was like, this is bullshit. What can we do to fix this? And there was enough of them where the city was like, oh, clearly this is important to the longevity of our cultural future. So how do we fix this? And they came up with this fund.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be an intermediate as well between like the true DIY places that you're talking about. The fusion factories and the places like that, and then there's going to also be, I think, I think there's going to be an ability to take some traditional bar club spaces and do some less traditional things with them. If people are there and ready to jump on them, I think there's going to be a lot of bars and restaurants that go out of business right now that are going to be spaces that already have bars and kitchens and bathrooms and everything ready to go. That if somebody wants to step in there with a cool concept, that there's going to be an opportunity for people to do something other than a sports bar. There's going to be an opportunity for people, if you want to do, this is going to be the moment where if you want to create, a 200 person, underground electronic music venue on a really small, intimate scale and do something, really amazing, like Do Not Sit in Miami, for example. Do something small like that. There's going to be a ton of opportunities for things like that if people want to jump on them.
There already kind of was. So I think a good example is Yeah Baby and Neon Baby. They're pop-up clubs, and they existed in places that didn't have anything in them that they were able to get a good deal on for a short term.
Yep.
Neon Babies was only for like 6 months or something like that. They're able to extend it. I don't know about anymore ever since COVID happened. But they just, Lodo's got bought out by new people. And they had the Madam whatever Hall and Mirrors, the old brothel, attached to the same building, and they didn't have anything going on for it. I don't know how exactly it happened or got negotiated or whatever, but Neon Baby comes up in there, and they were able to get in there before they had an extended period before they were doing renovations on the place, because the place was planning on renovating. So they were able to be in there until Lodo's, with the new owners, decided they needed to renovate it or upgrade it. So they got some sort of deal. I don't know exactly what it is. But, before that, they were at this other place. And I believe that was also a pop-up thing. And they had to leave because they had to do something, like they had to finance their sidewalk or something like that. There was something where the landlord wanted them to finance a sidewalk, or the city wanted them to have a sidewalk, but the landlord wouldn't pay for it or something like that. That's what happened there. But they were only planning on being a pop-up location anyways. I don't know why they were doing that, but that is a possibility, where you have these brands that don't quite have the ability to sign a multi-year lease in a spot to build out a big club, but they could sign 7 months or something like that, or 6 months, or whatever it needs in order to ramp up before the landlord has that next thing that they're expecting. And then they use that 7 months to build their brand, and then they move it to the next place. What's that?
I think they were doing that stuff out of necessity because there weren't many spaces. So they were like, okay, we'll fit in here for a little while, then we'll go here for a little while, then we'll go here for a little while. And I think that where there's going to be an opportunity after all of this is, I think that there's going to be some permanent spaces for people like that, where they don't necessarily have to pop from space to space, and they can say, okay, you know what, this was working before, and here's a good opportunity for us to get in with an affordable rent in a good location, a place that's already got everything that we wanted to have, and we can get a permanent home for what we wanted to do. And I think there's going to be some opportunities for people to do more underground versions of stuff that they weren't doing in the past.
I think so too. And
I hope people take them up on it.
Yeah, I think so too. And there's so many possibilities with what's going on now. There's a lot of silver linings, but I think we should save that for another time, because we could talk for, Jesus, I don't even know how long about that, but forever.
Days.
I hope you have fiber, because that upload is gonna be forever.
Yeah, I'm gonna just figure out what to do with this once it's done. I uploaded Eric. Eric and I had a pretty long conversation. Didn't take that long to upload. I think I went and I ate dinner, and I came back and it was done, or something like that. So I don't think it's gonna be too bad. YouTube's pretty good. But anyways, guys, I want to thank you for doing this. It's been
No worries.
It's been a lot of fun, and it's good to hear your guys' perspectives. So we will rendezvous out of public view, and we will figure out what to do next.
Yeah, sounds good.
You got it, buddy.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks, guys. I'm going to end it now.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll be in touch probably right after this to send a message to everybody.
Sounds good.
Cheerio.
Cheerio.
All right. Have a good night.
You guys as well. Thanks.